Welcome to my channel. Here, I don't just speak, but I invite you to think. Throughout my videos, I've questioned the deepest held beliefs, from philosophy, the dynamics of religion and faith, to personal identity. I ventured into the controversial because I know that only in honest, critical confrontation do we grow. My voice is a search for truth, unafraid of what is difficult. If you join this community today, you don't just watch, but you engage. Together, we open the door to a courageous dialogue, one that transforms us. Subscribe, share, and let's keep questioning, growing, and seeking truth together. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. Really excited to bring this one to you today. I don't really normally get into, does God exist type of conversations with people. I just prefer to avoid those for a couple of reasons. One, almost inevitably, what ends up happening is when you get into these conversations with believers, you end up backing them into one of two corners, either cognitive dissonance or moral bankruptcy. And I don't like to do that to people. It doesn't make me feel good. I'm not trying to get a one up on people in these types of conversations. I'm just seeking truth. And unfortunately, when you start to expose the problems with these different belief systems, a lot of times people, they need to believe this, they want to believe this, they're convinced of it, whatever the case may be, and they end up doubling down on their beliefs. And so it's just not a productive endeavor, is what I've found. Now, that's not to say that other people can't approach these topics however they want. But for me personally, I don't normally get into this kind of stuff. I would rather deal with real things like biology, history, philosophy, science, that kind of stuff, and focus my efforts there. My primary concern with religion and religious people isn't whether or not it's true per se. It's what are people doing with those beliefs. I've said many times on this channel, I think religion can actually be a good thing for people, if it's, as long as they're not using it to motivate them to cause harm. So there are people who quit drinking and using drugs, for example, right? And they credit a belief in God to give them the strength to overcome these things. I think it would be very disrespectful and inappropriate for me to try to convince them that God doesn't exist, right? There are people who have gone through personal tragedies in life, losing a loved one, parents losing a small child in a car accident or something, and they rely on their belief in God to help them get through that. Again, it would be very disrespectful for me to try and convince them that God they believe in isn't real, even though I may not be convinced myself. The other issue is that I'm actually an agnostic when it comes to particular God claims. I think anything that is supposed to live outside or exist outside of time and space, or anything supernatural, cannot be tested, measured, or observed. And so therefore, we should not make definitive claims for or against something like that. So I remain agnostic. That being said, I am fully convinced that the anthropomorphized gods, these are anthropomorphic, means to give human traits or characteristics. So the gods that are supposed to have walked in the Garden of Eden or spoken to man or have emotions like they get jealous or they're loving, or these are all human characteristics. I believe we create these gods, and I don't take those claims seriously. So people could call me an agnostic atheist if they wanted to. I don't refer to myself as a type of atheist because I don't even take those claims seriously. I know pretty confidently like why we invent those kind of gods, who and when they were invented, having studied many religions and history. So I just don't take those claims seriously enough to call myself some type of atheist. But I'm always open to have a conversation with somebody as long as it's polite. The guest I'm going to bring on today, his name is Khalid. He's a brother I've spoken to many times now and really enjoy conversations with him. He's very polite, really intelligent family man. I think he's doing the best he can to live a good life and to raise his children right. The best way he knows how. He seems to be very amicable and approachable, and he's convinced that Allah is real and that the Quran can prove that Allah is real. So I'm really excited to bring him up today, and maybe he can convince me. I'm certainly open to being convinced, because the one thing I do know is that I can be wrong. I have been wrong, and I will be wrong in the future. So maybe Khalid can show me where the error of my ways here. So let me bring Khalid up and let the brother introduce himself to you, and then we're going to jump right into, does the Quran prove the existence of Allah? Thank you so much for joining us today, brother. You're always welcome here.
Thank you, bro. I appreciate you having me. Really good to always good to be on your channel because you're very polite. As you said, I'm polite, and I think why not be open to education and different points of view? A lot of people think they've studied different religions, but I think from my experience, a lot of people don't know that much about Islam. So, and I think some of these ideas will be new to you. Um, I don't want to make it too complicated by saying like all the stuff I had in mind, but maybe it would have been useful because both of us are quite busy. I've given you a link in the private chat. I couldn't post it in the public chat, maybe because, you know, links could go to bad places or something in the public chat. So if you wouldn't mind, can you see the private chat?
Yes, and I can post. Let me look before I say yes. Yes, I
It's
do
the
see that
verse of
link.
the Quran that I'll be quoting.
Yep,
Basically.
I can post. Yeah, YouTube, I think, is pretty restrictive on letting people post links in the chats, and even in a lot of times in comments and videos after they've posted. YouTube will automatically strike some of that stuff down. So I have no control over that. I'm not the one striking it down. YouTube does it automatically.
No problem.
But what I can do is I can actually post this link in the description of the video. That way, anybody who
Cool.
wants to, now or later, will be able to reference that. Does that sound good? And I can try and post
That's
it actually
great.
right now in the chat. I don't know if anybody's going to necessarily leave the stream to go look at it.
I mean, they could read it at the same time. It's just a document. They could just see like the quotes and one of the reasons why it's kind of useful is because some people number things in the Quran slightly differently, and I don't want to go into the technicalities. So it's like literally has links to the Quran. The Quran is always available online. So it just makes things easier if people are really interested in references and things. I should say something about myself. I am my channel is called Helpful Ahmadi. And Ahmadi is where the most international, worldwide organized group of Muslims. We are famous for saying love for all, hatred for none. It's probably worth mentioning I'm in Ghana, Africa at the moment, visiting family, and it might sound a bit funny, looking for a possible World War III home, if people are kind of following what's happening with petrol crisis and fertilizer crisis, etc. So I don't have all my usual technology, best mic and everything, and the lighting might not be perfect, but anyway, great having you. Thank you for having me here. And one of the things I think the last thing probably worth mentioning, as Ahmadi Muslims, we write a lot of scientific material. All our material is online, available for free. So we don't sell material to make money or something like books and things. Or if you have a printed book, it costs some money, but we make all our books available online and all our videos and explanations available online, and it's all scientific. So we like to be logical and scientific about our beliefs. A lot of people who are atheists or agnostics often think that we're illogical for believing in it. So I would like to try to change that perspective, because we have to remember we don't know everything. We haven't talked to everybody, so we should be open to the idea that there is a logical reason for believing in God. That's my introduction.
Oh, that sounds great. I'm really looking forward to getting into this because I have studied the Judaism and Christianity, mostly Christianity, a bit of Judaism, and as well as world religions, but I haven't really spent a lot of time studying Islam. So this is going to be kind of new information for me and new exposure. I have heard on different talk shows and stuff like that, debates between Muslims and atheists, or Muslims and Christians, even Muslims and Jews. So it is kind of interesting how there's three different divisions of the Abrahamic religion, and then within those divisions there's more divisions. And so it's kind of seems strange to me that if there was any truth in this, that people would be unified. And so I'm just that seems strange. Like I said, if people are so divided,
it's very easy to respond or explain those kind of ideas. So
so divided, it is very strange.
So I'll quickly, because that's kind of that's a point you're making, and I should respond to it very quickly. First of all, is important to know about Islam. It's the fastest growing religion in the West, so why not? And Christianity is losing its number. So if you know about Christianity but not Islam, it kind of makes more sense to learn more about Islam anyway. So generally speaking, and most converts to Islam are white women. So to say that it's an oppressive religion doesn't make sense. And what was your other point? I forgot. You said something about.
Well, I didn't say anything about it being oppressive or not. I hadn't even gotten into any of that, but I was just talking about the division. It's division within division. So like with Islam specifically, there's the Sunnis and the Shias. Is that right? As the two main divisions?
Sure. Yeah. There's categories that put themselves in. Yeah.
And then now with this helpful Ahmadi, is this a division within one of those two divisions, or is this a third category altogether?
I would say it's its own category. Yeah. So is it surprising that people, first of all, there are different religions. Remember, these religions have been around for a long period of time. And I would say the Islamic understanding is, very briefly, God made everything to have a sell-by date. So Christianity, if you go, and Judaism, they're actually tribal religions, and for a very limited amount of time. They weren't supposed to be international religions if you go to their source. So it's not surprising that those religions are allowed to decay or be changed. There's clear contradictions. I participated in one of your streams where we put forward contradictions in the Quran, in the Bible, but you don't find those contradictions in the Quran. And there's an open challenge for people to find one contradiction, because the Quran says there are no contradictions in it. So yeah, it's not surprising that things change a little bit, but there is a lot of overlap and understanding, because they actually come from the same religion, the same God, we believe. Yeah, that's a quick response to that.
Oh, it looks like there's a really positive comment already in the comments. I'm just going to show this here. It's always nice to see you join us now. Nell says that even though, as an atheist, they believe it's great that there are Muslims who hold humanist values, want to live in harmony with people who hold different beliefs, and have scientific curiosity. I agree with Nell 100%. Nell is a very kind human being and really fair. I've had some wonderful conversations with them. And I agree, actually, just on personal experience, for what it's worth. I have several neighbors who live next to me and that are Muslims. I have at least one of my employees currently is a Muslim. I've had, I think, at least 3 Muslim employees working for me in the near past or whatever. 2 of them have gone on, and they've all been wonderful people, wonderful human beings. So in fact, I don't think I can. I don't know of all the Muslims that I've known, and I've known quite a few over the course of my life. I can't actually think of any of them that weren't really polite, friendly, really nice people to know. I've had some interactions with Muslims online that are not so friendly, but the online space can be like that no matter what. I've had really unfriendly interactions with atheists and agnostics and Christians and everybody, you know what I mean? So the online is not necessarily the best judge of all that, but in person, I've known several Muslims who are wonderful human beings, and I really enjoy my neighbors very much, actually. So I would agree with what Nell's saying there. So we weren't necessarily going to get into contradictions per se. I mean, I don't know what you have, I'm kind of letting you kind of run the show to a certain degree, because you came to prove to me. So I'm not here to disprove anything to you, although I am intending to research here for the audience whatever you bring up, and we'll look at it together and see where the truth may lie, or if we can just agree on anything, or maybe we have to agree to disagree, but that's perfectly fine. I think the most valuable thing for today is to show people that respectful disagreements, respectful conversations from both different sides of the aisle. And one thing I do want to just clarify, I realized I wanted to do this, so just bear with me for a second. There was a conversation you were having on Claire's channel, and a lot of my audience knows who Claire is. She's pretty infamous, I think, on the internet at this point. You know, secular Quranism, that's Claire Claw for anybody who doesn't know. And that sounds like there's a bit of constriction back there.
Oh, can you hear something?
Yeah, I could hear that quite a bit. You may
need. Sorry. Okay, it's a frog. We've got lots of animals, wildlife around, so maybe I'll try to close the window. The frogs are really loud here.
I guess so, brother. I thought that was like
I'm in Africa.
That's hilarious. I thought it was like a construction vehicle or something. That is it really, nature.
And if it's not like, if it was during the daytime, it'd be like goats. You'd hear goats, so like you'd hear something. But yeah,
that is wild. That is so funny. Yeah. I thought that was a vehicle. That's really impressive. At any rate, I was gonna say, so you were talking to Claire, I don't know, a week or so ago. And Claire, she calls me a militant atheist, and she's welcome to call me whatever she wants, But I said, well, I'm actually agnostic, and as I described at the beginning of this video here today, I was surprised that you guys didn't actually, and this is not a criticism of you guys, it's just surprised that not only you guys, but I find this happens a lot, that a lot of people don't understand what agnosticism actually is. And I just want to clarify for you and the audience to make sure we're all on the same page, is that agnostic is not just an I don't know. Agnostic is actually the position that I don't think it's possible to know. And that's a really important distinction to make. It's not just to say, oh, well, I don't know, who knows, it could be anything. It's actually the belief that anything about a God that's supernatural cannot be known. And again, as I said, because we can't test it, measure it, observe it like we can with the empirical method, which is what we use in the scientific field, right? So we could, oh, Jesus. Sorry. God, I got to turn that off. Sorry about that. My employees are trying to call me. I told them not to call me on Sundays. So usually I don't have my ringer on. I'm so sorry about that. That was so loud. That scared the crap out of me too. At any rate, let me just make sure. Okay. They'll have to figure it out. What was I saying? Oh yeah, agnostic. So yeah, when I say I'm agnostic, it's because I just don't think it can be known. It isn't to say that I'm just in the middle or it's a wishy-washy position. It's actually a pretty firm position that it can't be known. I don't think it can be. So I just wanted to clarify for you and for the audience, when I say agnostic, that's actually what I'm talking about. Oh, there's Claire right there. Look at that. So yeah, Claire. So so as I was saying, that's great timing. As I was saying, you like to call me a militant atheist, which I think is hilarious. And as I said before, I don't know if you heard it or not, Claire, but you're welcome to call me whatever you want. I believe in free speech, and I'm not a sensitive person, but just to educate you a little bit on what agnosticism actually is. And Claire knows, because I've explained it to her several times, my position on why I consider myself an agnostic. As I said at the beginning of this video, that I don't take the anthropomorphic God seriously. But she insists that if I don't take the Abrahamic God seriously, then I have to be a militant atheist. And she's welcome to hold that view if she wants to. All right, brother. So let's get into our first proof here. Where would you like me to start? I've got this Quran.
Yeah. So what I'll do, if you like, I'll just paste in the chat, and then could you just highlight that? That'll make it easy. It's just or if you like to do it that way, you can do it from there. But you can you see my comment?
Let me see here.
The last comment. You can just click on it, and you've got like the reference and whatever.
Okay, is it right here? 2274.
Yeah.
Okay, let me put that in here so I can
for the audience. In Quran.com, it'll probably be 2273. So put 2273 because people have slightly different numbering systems.
Okay. Let me see if that breaks it up. Yep. Oh, humanity. Is that the one?
Yeah.
A lesson is set forth. Okay. And make sure. Yeah, it looks like the audience can see that. Okay. So I've got here, oh, humanity, a lesson is set forth, so listen to it carefully. Those idols you invoke besides Allah can never create so much as a fly, even if they all were to come together for that. And if a fly were to snatch anything away from them, they cannot even retrieve it from the fly. How powerless are those who invoke those and those who invoked. So what is this telling us?
Okay, so I'm focusing like on the first bit. So it's saying like for all humanity to consider this idea, and we in Islam we can have different concepts of idols. They don't have to be literally those who, like a stone god. It could be people who you revere, you value instead of God, for example, or you defer your judgment to, and things like that. So there's slightly different ways of translating Arabic because it's quite a poetic language, but there's the same sort of understanding. So you could say, um, listen to this example. Notice that those people who you invoke, or those idols, those creations that you depend on, besides Allah, that is God, cannot even create a fly. So consider, if you think ex atheist, let's call him, I don't know, Stephen Hawking or Richard Dawkins, whoever, right? And say, I trust this person with my belief system. These people who are trying to convince you that God doesn't exist and that somehow it can be created through some randomized process and that we were created by it, and all these complicated um, systems that maintain our lives on planet Earth, they cannot even create a fly. They try to give the impression that maybe it's somehow easy or whatever. Recently, people tried to map out the brain of a tiny fly, and that was like billions and billions of neurons, incredibly complex task. So, in many ways, I would say I'm going to provide three different kinds of evidence, and this is a sort of psychological and experience evidence where our experiences that not even a fly is possible to be made. So to claim confidently that there's no God, there's no need for a God or intelligent creator, and the same people who are saying that there's no need for it cannot make even a fly, you should question and have doubts about their opinions. That's my first thought. What do you think?
Well, I think as far as there is no God, again, as an agnostic, I don't take that position. I do think, though, because of evolution, biological evolution, we can safely say there's no need for a God to create a fly because flies have evolved. I would say pretty safely that we have enough scientific evidence to back up the theory of evolution. I would also concede that there is something that's called theistic evolution, where a lot of creationists will say that the God, whether it's Allah or Yahweh or whichever God they believe in, actually uses evolution to create, which I think is actually a pretty respectable position to take if you're determined to hold on to the creationist view and you at least accept the science that we have, which is so well evidenced. Evolution is one of the most well evidenced theories that we actually have. Then I think that we can safely say where the fly comes from. Abiogenesis, which is a separate conversation than evolution, that gets us into another conversation. Abiogenesis is, we have a few really strong theories, they think, on abiogenesis, and we have pretty good reason to believe that, again, abiogenesis is a perfectly natural process. So, but you could just back the God claim up one step further and say, well, God used abiogenesis. So I don't think abiogenesis or evolution refute the existence of a creator. I would concede that. However, I would also say that because of evolution and abiogenesis, I don't think that we should say, well, we have to have a creator either. It doesn't seem to me, it doesn't seem like we actually have to impose a supernatural creator to have flies, for example. And now, would you say that's fair?
I think I'm not sure if you fully understood the point, maybe, that to even claim that there is no creator is a tall claim when you cannot create the most basic or one of the lowest forms of that creation. To say we don't need an intelligent creator to make something as complicated as us. When you cannot create a fly, you should have some doubts in that claim. That's the point that's being made. Does that make sense? Can you see the reasoning?
Well, we might be talking past each other to a certain degree. I don't actually make the claim that we don't need that there is no creator, because as I said,
Okay.
you could include abiogenesis and evolution and a creator all at the same time. And you could also just have abiogenesis and evolution without the creator. So
Okay.
I think,
Could you explain abiogenesis, please?
yeah, abiogenesis, and again, I should make sure everybody here knows that I am not a biologist or a chemist. So I'm only just going to repeat information that I've been told. And you'll have to do your own due diligence and research this. And I'm certainly open to being corrected by somebody who knows more about it than I do. But my understanding of abiogenesis is the process where chemicals, which we know exist all over in the universe, are formed in such a way that they become organic chemicals. Once they become organic chemicals, then we get the building blocks of life. And I believe the strongest theory that I'm aware of is called RNA world, which is where these chemicals first started producing RNA. RNA then ultimately produces DNA. You get single-celled organisms ultimately becoming multi-celled organisms, and then this gives us the building blocks for evolution to start. Evolution is just simply change in allele frequency over time. So once life is started, right? Once we get the organic chemical process started, organic molecules, process started, then we can work with evolution. And evolution itself has so much evidence that there's anybody who denies evolution is just simply denying science, and it goes into conspiracy theory, literally flat earth level conspiracy theory territory. And so I'm certainly willing to give people platforms to expose themselves or their ideas, because that's only fair. But personally, I think that people who deny evolution are just not living in the real world. But I don't think that you're on that level. I think that, you and I are on the same page that whether we think God did it or not, evolution is very well evidenced, right? So I think you can have evolution and abiogenesis with or without a God. So I don't think people should say, oh, because we have abiogenesis figured out or evolution figured out, we should then just automatically dismiss the God concept, because I don't think one leads to the other necessarily.
Okay, so I'm not sure what your position is. That you say that you don't disbelieve in a God, yet that it's not possible to believe logically in a God. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, no, I don't think it's impossible to believe. I don't think that it's possible to know one way or the other. I think that in order to know something, so there's basically in philosophy, they talk about, I think it's Kant who talks about there's two different ways we come to knowledge. There's what we call empirical knowledge, which is what we use the scientific method for. So matter and energy, anything related to matter and energy, the physical universe, we can test, observe, measure, make predictions, repeat our tests, and then have theories based on that. The other part of knowledge that we have is what we call practical certainty. And practical certainty is where our beliefs come into play. Like I have practical certainty that my wife is going to come home from her lunch meeting today and she's not going to run off to Mexico with somebody else, right? I don't have any empirical evidence that can prove that. I can point at a 30-year marriage and a happy relationship and so on and so forth and say I'm pretty confident that my wife is going to come home from her lunch date today with her friends. But I can't technically say that I know that, right? I believe it. So we have practical certainty and we have empirical knowledge. The beliefs in God fall under practical certainty for people. They have their beliefs, they have personal stories that are anecdotal to them, something motivates them. But I've never seen a single test that's been successful that actually proves the existence of a God. And I don't think we can test something supernatural. I think that's not what science is even meant to do.
So you could call the belief in God a practical certainty, but I'm not sure what goes outside the realms of practical certainty sometimes, because you can't measure, you can't stick a ruler in front of God and say there's God or something like that, right? But it makes sense to believe what's more logical than less logical, and I would say it's less logical to believe that God was created by a set of random processes. And people will start saying that I don't understand evolution. And then I invite people to describe their understanding of evolution by random processes rather than guided by an intelligent creator, which is far more logical. Like all our experiences in the universe of anything created that we know is created was created by an intelligent creator who had a design in mind. And so just you made a video not too long ago, YouTube short, saying that to demonstrate how you can have you try to explain how entropy, which is the idea that over time, logically, just statistically, you'll have things, if left to their own devices, they will lose organization. That's just natural. And then you said that, well, if you have a pack of cards, which are totally in order, but for some reason you are interested in pairs and you consider that order, um, when you shuffle the cards, you will get some level of order. And then my argument is, well, first of all, to create anything complicated, create life, it's far infinitely more complicated than that, and I can demonstrate it mathematically. That, like, first of all, the idea of shuffling cards and having a few pairs is nothing to do with having anything remotely close to the organization in living organisms. But if evolution is about repeating the process, and you get more and more complicated things. But what happens if you keep shuffling cards is you continuously lose the pairs that you had, and you get some other random pairs, and you don't build in complexity, and you won't build in complexity because that's the whole idea of entropy. So those are, and just to go back to an earlier point, you said that you can't believe in humanized or I can't say the word anthropomorphic.
Oh, anthropomorphic. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So the Quran, I think I mentioned before, definitely does not talk about a humanized form of God. The Quran actually says there's nothing like God. So that's just some ideas there.
Just really quick to touch on that so we don't load up too much. As far as so the deck shuffling analogy was not intended to fully explain the complexities of evolution. I don't think you could do that with just a simple analogy like that, and I wouldn't make that attempt. The specific analogy that I was making and where the deck shuffling actually does apply is people who reject evolution altogether say that entropy is evidence that evolution must be false because energy will always go from a state of order, energy and matter, everything will go from a state of order to a state of disorder in a closed system. That's the second law of thermonuclear dynamics, right? However, the shuffling of the deck of cards, what that shows is that if you have a brand new deck of cards, it's always in perfect order from the ace all the way to the king and in each suit, right? There's no pairs, there's no triples, there's no four of a kind, nothing like that. No full house, no organized hands or anything. It's just in the straight perfect order numerically. If you take that deck and you shuffle it, you now have a mathematical probability of ending up with a pair of twos or three kings. You know, there's actually a mathematical chance that you could end up with a four of a kind. It's highly improbable shuffling at one time that's going to happen, but it could mathematically happen. What that tells us is that entropy, just because you take things from disorder, you start moving towards disorder, doesn't mean that everything is just complete chaos, so there's no structure to it. What happens is with entropy is you end up getting small pockets of order. And now we're talking over a universe that could be infinite for all we know. We're also talking about a period of time that could also be infinite. So the number of shuffles becomes incalculable, which means you do have tremendous opportunity to get these pockets of order. However, when it relates to evolution in a bigger analogy, evolution deals with two things. There's random mutation, but there's also environmental pressure. So, and again, I'm not the biologist, and I see in the chats, there's probably a lot of people who are just face palming right now saying I'm doing such a terrible job of explaining evolution, which is probably true. I should definitely have somebody more qualified than myself explaining this. But from my understanding is that environmental pressure is not random, right? So the organisms that are evolving, the ones that survive, it's called survival of the fittest, which is another thing a lot of people misunderstand. This is not might makes right. It's not the strongest that are surviving. Okay, that gets misused all the time, misunderstood. Survival of the fittest means fittest for the environment, the ambient environment, right? The external environment. So if there's the first organisms were not able to metabolize oxygen, right? And so when they started producing oxygen at a massive level and all this oxygen started becoming into the environment, the organisms that were alive they actually choked out on this because it's a gas, right? It's a chemical technically. So they actually, it killed most of the organisms. One of the first mass extinction event was simple cell organisms, right? And they couldn't metabolize the oxygen. It actually suffocated them. So the thing that we use to breathe right now, that we rely on, that all life on Earth basically relies on, is oxygen. It actually was poisonous to the first organisms because they had not evolved to metabolize oxygen, right? And so this is how the environment affects all this. Now, the shuffling the deck of cards is not going to be able to explain all of that in complexity. The other issue that you mentioned was, oh yeah, the anthropomorphic gods. So the Quran may very well say that Allah is not like any man, or is this or that, and I would expect them to. In fact, all the God claims that I'm aware, all the anthropomorphic God claims say the same thing. Well, don't this is a God, this is not a man. Man can't do this. Man is limited, but this God is unlimited, so on and so forth. The problem is when they describe the traits of the God, that's when you get anthropomorphic. Some texts talk about.
Can you give me an example from the Quran? Like, because I think you don't know that much about Islam.
I'll have to ask you because I'm not as familiar with the Quran. So does Allah have a will or emotions or a mind, or does he love things?
Yeah.
So that's anthropomorphic.
No, it's not. It's like
it is by definition, because human beings have emotions. So it's not just physical traits.
No, you're categorizing it like that. It's not by definition. So animals also have feelings, right? Just because you have feelings, that's fine. That's not a thing that means God is resembling human beings. There is only to the extent that God has created human beings to be able to understand some level of what God expects of us. Like if we do bad things, God will be angered. And if we didn't understand feelings, or we were created in a way that we couldn't understand feelings, we couldn't comprehend God's expectations. So it's kind of like, it's rather the opposite. So we have been created, so like in the Bible, it says we've been created in the image of God. And we have similar concepts in Islam, right? That we have been created in a way that we can understand God. So God is not created in our image, we are created in his or God's image.
So just to be clear, the definition for anthropomorphic is, as I stated, having human characteristics. It doesn't necessarily mean fingers, opposable thumbs, two legs, things of that nature. It could be anything that's related to human beings, any characteristic whatsoever. So,
but it's also shared with animals.
Yes, that's right.
So that's
so we have other.
Makes sense.
Yes, and that's why human beings are animals. Actually, we're just another. We're mammals. So we're just another animal. We're highly evolved animals, but we're also animals. So human beings, but
it's not an argument against the belief in God, that God can have feelings and is generous and kind. These are not just because they overlap with things that human beings can understand or appreciate, because we're supposed to be kind and God wants us to be kind and things like that. So if we didn't understand those concepts, that God, qualities that God has, then we wouldn't be able to follow God or listen to God's instructions. It wouldn't make any sense to us.
Yeah, I think that to a certain degree, I see what you're saying there. The reason it falls apart for me personally is because it creates a weakness in this being. So in the God concept, if the God is loving, that means the God can have its feelings hurt, or the God can be rejected. And I don't think a super powerful being that's powerful enough to create the
But those are assumptions. Like that's not the belief in, like you're connecting lots of things that are not the belief in the God of Islam. Like God says, in Islam, the Quran says he doesn't have any need for human beings. Like he doesn't depend on human beings, he can manage without it. But he can still be kind to human beings, he can still love human beings. So you're putting links there. But I would say generally your argument to say that just because there are qualities that God has and human beings can share a tiny bit of, right? So God is very generous, but like human beings cannot be anywhere near as generous. God gives us air and so many other things, right? Just because there's tiny overlap, that's not really an argument here or there, but you can feel that if you like, but it's not a reasonable argument. It doesn't like there's no clear argument to say, oh my gosh, I can't believe in this God that is generous. That doesn't make any sense to
Yeah, because
yeah.
from my point of view, and again, I can only speak for myself. So I would say if men, human beings, were to be the ones who invented gods, what would I expect these gods to be like? And I would expect these gods to be like men. Whereas if I flip it and I say, well, if there was this creator that wanted to create things, would I necessarily expect this creator to create men in God's image? No, I wouldn't. Why would, that to me makes no sense. Like, why would this God want to be
Are
worshipped?
you saying it makes no sense, even though you just said you kind of understood why
Yeah,
there had
I
to
understand
be?
what you're saying, and I understand what you're saying. But yeah, to me, it doesn't make sense. Like, if I flip it around, right, and I say, okay, like I said before, so the initial place is if men created God, I would personally expect that God to have these anthropomorphic traits. If I flip it around, I wouldn't expect people to have the godlike traits or characteristics. If they did, then I would expect them to be like superhumans or superheroes or something like that, like the Titans, for example. If the God was going to create humans, why would he create humans to be so weak and fallible and so fragile? If this God is we're so far removed from any concept of supernatural powers or abilities, that if we're created in this image, I would expect to have more of the traits of the God, not to just be, because what traits do we actually share with the God? Just the feeling, just the emotions of love.
I don't really understand your argument really. Like you're saying that if okay, I don't think you could even put forward an concept of God that you would accept because I'm not sure what concept of God. Like you have to have an alternative and say like I think it should be this,
Yeah,
but
I
I
think
don't
a
think it's a strong
deistic,
argument to say just
yeah, a
because God
God
is
that I would
generous.
think would be
Yeah.
more plausible would be like the deistic God. Are you familiar with deism versus theism?
Just give me a definition
Sure, sure,
of
sure.
like what you
So
think would be a reasonable God.
deism would be like the idea of a super powerful creator being that has no interaction with the creation, no personal interaction or personal relationship with its creation whatsoever. It doesn't interact in the world. It just created for its own sake, like a painter paints a painting, doesn't interact with the painting. They just enjoy their own creation, right? That's what I would expect would make more sense. I'm not saying that I believe in that, but I think that would be more logically coherent than a God that's so powerful that wants to create these little, not even ants. And we would be less than ants to a God. We'd be like the slime mold compared to this God, not even that. And this God would want to have a relationship with slime mold. To me, that doesn't make sense unless the God was lacking something like a need for affirmation or relationship or love or need for worship or something. Then this God would create these little autonomous robots and give them rules and say, okay, I want you to follow me and worship me, and I'll give you a reward for your worship. Then that logically makes sense why this God would do that. But that just falls apart because it's like, well, why wouldn't this God just make autonomous robots instead of human beings that could reject it? What's the point? What's the game all about? Like, it just falls apart on so many levels for me.
I mean, maybe it falls apart because you haven't been introduced to that kind of plan for God. The plan God has for us, right? So, as I said, God doesn't need anything from us. God wants to create a, a creation that will keep growing in complexity and depth and spirituality, and for that we need guidance. So God is a kind God. So what is a kind God? God gives you rules of like what would work for you as a human being, but you don't have to follow those rules. It's your choice because that's why you've got free will. And so that's the brief explanation. I think that explains it. I kind of want to move on quickly to the next point.
Sure.
We've got kind of a few minutes left, but I think I appreciate the comments you're making because I think there's a lot that's not understood about the Islamic concept of God that rebuts all the points you've made so far very very easily.
Do you mind if I
So
ask
I'll
you
move.
one question? And
Yeah,
I definitely don't want to press you. I'm not trying to pin you in a corner here. Okay. So if you don't want
yeah.
to answer, you want
I
to
don't
just
think you
move.
can. I've had lots of debates endlessly. I'm not going to figure that at all.
Right on,
Yeah,
brother. No, I appreciate you very much,
yeah,
and I appreciate your patience because I
yeah.
understand that these are things that you do believe very strongly, and I don't. So it can be really hard to have these conversations, and I respect anybody who can have them with intellectual honesty, which you've always brought to the table. So, if men were in fact the ones who created gods, would do you agree with me that what we would expect to see is that the gods would then have some of these anthropomorphic traits? Do you can you see where I'm coming from with that statement? I'm not saying you have to agree that they did create these gods, but if we just say hypothetically human beings did invent the gods, don't you think it would make the most sense? What we would expect to see is that these gods would have some of these anthropomorphic traits.
Maybe, but these are just complete hypotheticals, and I'm not sure what
Yeah,
benefit. And also, like mostly, I would say, if you're creating a god, you're going to create a superhuman. So you're going to not have too many human-like qualities because that makes it that god weaker. So I would even argue against it, really. But maybe some qualities, maybe. But these are just hypotheticals that are
yeah, just
neither
hypothetical.
here or there. They're not
Yeah, yeah.
arguments that make it. They're not arguments of any sort, I would say.
Yeah, no, just hypothetically, just so you can see kind of how
Yeah,
my mind was kind of worky there.
sure.
Okay, what's your next
Sure.
point with the
So
with
yeah,
with
and just to wind up that point, the first point I made at these verses, the kind of people that a lot of atheists are putting their trust in, they are not particularly respectful. These are people who recently have been coming up in the Epstein files a lot, and, Richard Dawkins. I've provided a file where we've got people like Richard Dawkins and Stephen Hawking and different famous atheists who've been in the Epstein files. So these are not people you really want to depend on. My next argument is
Now, are you thinking they're in the Epstein files because they're atheists or just because they're bad people in general? Do you think atheism is
I was saying I would say but the main point is that you don't want to depend. A lot of people idolize, this is kind of the point of the verse, a lot of people idolize these people and put too much trust in these people. These are very untrustworthy people, and having read some of their books, you really shouldn't trust them. Very weak arguments. The argument that they put forward, for example, that you've got endless time. No, we don't have endless time. We believe, most scientists believe in the Big Bang. So you mentioned you kind of inferred or gave a suggestion that that was even some sort of reality. It's not a reality. We don't have endless time. We don't even have enough time to make a drop of blood, and that's one of the arguments I quickly put forward um, in the document I provided. But yeah, my point is that these people are really not people to trust, and it's the fact that they're untrustworthy is coming out. So don't just fall for their tricks. And believing in God is a very unreasonable position, is what I'm saying. And
Well, I do want to touch
yeah,
on. I don't want to just let the Epstein files comment go without touching on that because that's
mm,
a really loaded comment, and
mm,
I would argue. Now, I don't know what's in the Epstein files. I don't think most people do, to be honest with you. I don't really follow a lot of politics or news because I get really frustrated with what's happening in the political sphere here in America in
mm,
particular. So I'm what's called an independent centrist. I don't like the left or the right personally. I think both sides are extremely corrupt. My understanding of the Epstein files is it's full of a very diverse group of people, religious people and irreligious people. So I don't think religion is any kind of a defining factor when it comes to the Epstein files. Now I could be wrong because I don't know what's in the files, but that's the impression I'm under. What the common thread that those people all have in common is they're all pieces of shit. So I think that's the one thing they all have in common. I don't think that they're all atheists or they're all Christians or Muslims or Jews or whatever, Zoroastrians, who knows what. I think they come from a variety of backgrounds. But there's two different kinds of religious people, in my opinion. There's good religious people who just want to have a belief in their God and practice their religion and live good lives and be caring for other people. And then there's people who use religion like a weapon. Just like a gun doesn't do anything to anybody if it's sitting on the table. It's not until somebody puts it in their hand and goes to rob a bank with it that it becomes a problem, right? I see religion as being the same thing. Religion's not hurting anybody, in my opinion. I know there are a lot of
benefiting. Mostly it benefits people. That's
I
kind
think
of
it can. I think it's yeah. I
yeah.
think it definitely can benefit people. I agree with you 100%. But it's how it's used. So that's how I would respond to the Epstein thing. And again, I humbly will admit I don't know what's in the fucking files. I have no idea. I'm assuming
I've put a link. You might, for people who are interested. Just like I'm just saying, don't follow these people blindly. Just be careful what they say. And I'm also, before I cast aspersions on their characters, which is important. Like if somebody's a thief, you don't let them in your house, right?
right.
But also make a point that their arguments are very weak. Like their arguments are openly to confuse people who don't know any better or who like follow arguments that sound good, like survival of the fittest, but when you break them down, those arguments break down very quickly. So the idea that, you know, there's these forces like wind, rain, sun, whatever, and that can somehow construct something. That's actually the opposite of reality of all our experiences. You put a microchip out in the open, if anything complicated, it will get destroyed. So these, you know, random processes, wind, rain, sun, etc., these are not constructive, these are destructive processes. And just it's a Goebbels effect. If you keep being told something over and over again, you start believing it's true. And I think I fell for that when I was an atheist for a while. So but I want to
I do want to touch on one other thing you said. The time, the Big Bang. I don't know if you mentioned in a previous conversation, the Quran actually talks about the Big Bang before Big Bang cosmology was actually realized, the expansion of the universe. I believe that was Einstein, if I remember correctly. I'd love to get into that because I'm skeptical the Big Bang is actually in the Quran, but you might show me. I don't know the Quran, so you might be able to show that to me. But one thing I will say, just as a correction, you said it's impossible for there to be endless time, and that I'd be curious how you actually prove that it would be impossible.
I was saying that doesn't make sense if you believe there was a beginning for the Big Bang.
So the Big Bang is not the beginning of everything. The Big Bang is only the beginning of this current iteration of the universe. Just as far back as we could go to, I believe it's called the Planck temperature. So we can only go back with our current understanding of physics to a certain point. But I think the significant majority of cosmologists believe the Big Bang came from a pre-existing hot dense state. It's not that it just came from nothing and there's suddenly this Big Bang. That's actually a misunderstanding of what the Big Bang says. And I know that there's been a lot of really bad information on the internet about the Big Bang because it was put forth incorrectly and in simplified terms for so long as being the beginning of space and time and all this other stuff. Modern cosmology does not make that assertion. In fact, my understanding is, and people should do their own research because I'm always open to be wrong, but my understanding is the majority of cosmologists actually support either an infinite universe or like what they call quantum loop gravity, multiverse. There's many different models that talk about being this basically eternal existence. The other issue we have when we talk about the beginning, quote unquote, if there was nothing, which I don't think cosmologists actually believe, you got something from nothing. So there was something previously, this hot dense state, quantum fields, things of this nature, or maybe an endless loop cycle like I was talking about. Technically speaking, even philosophically, if you have absolutely nothing, that means you have no rules, which means the whole you can't get something for nothing, that rule doesn't actually exist. So philosophically, you could even make an argument for that. So you can make an argument for infinite time, looping time, something from nothing. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to approach it. So when you say definitively it can't be this way, I think you're overstepping what you can actually prove, unless you actually can prove that, which I'm open to seeing that proof, of course.
So the Quran actually talks about like infinite like cycles of universes. So the Quran talks about that the universe will be wrapped up and he'll recreate the universe. So I don't have a problem with like multi-universal infinite cycles of universes. Actually very much a Quranic idea. What I'm saying is that if you have the general idea is people believe in a Big Bang, and the Big Bang started from a very small mass. So let me put that on the screen. So maybe
okay, give me
chapter, Yeah.
Is it called a
Chapter.
surah, or what is the actual
Yeah,
name?
surah is the general name for the chapters, but you can just write chapter 21,
Okay.
verse 30.
Yeah,
30.
this is actually I really do need to get more into this because the Quran is on my list, my bucket list of books to read. But the problem is that list is like several pages of books I'd like to read.
Yeah.
There's just so much great information out there and so little time. Okay, so yes, it's on the screen here. So you said 2130?
Yeah.
Okay, so do the believers not realize that the heavens and earth were once one mass when we split them apart, and we created from water every living thing? Will they not then believe?
So this is an argument for disbelievers. They're particularly being referenced here and saying, look, we're telling you something that was not known until Einstein. So people who don't know when Islam started, about 1500 years ago. So well over 1,000 years before Einstein, and a lot more than that. And then there's a second concept, even in that one verse about that all living things are made from water, and this is kind of a maybe generally understood idea. That's why NASA scientists look for water as evidence for life. So these are two big ideas that were not known before. The idea of there being a big bang was really quite an alien idea, a very strange idea until now we've got used to it. So Einstein resisted believing in this concept of the big bang. He always just thought that it always existed forever, even though it was his own equations that suggested that there was a big bang. So my point is that one, this is just another pointer. Like if God wanted to demonstrate, I am here and here's a book to help you. And how do you know there's a book to help me? One of the many ways is I'm going to tell you things that people didn't know at the time Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And so people might say, this is misinterpreted. You're reading the verses as you wish and all these kind of things. So feel free to read the verses before and afterwards and see if there's some sort of misinterpretation. But coming quickly back to the argument that you were saying, that there may be, infinite loops of universes. I agree, first of all, the Quran agrees, so that's not a problem. The problem is that when the universe began, we only had things like, I think it was hydrogen, helium, very basic chemicals, not enough to create a human being. We're made of carbon and so many other things, right? So we didn't have all the ingredients. It took a long process to create that, right? And so it takes time and takes some sort of process. And I'm saying, even if you were to assume, to cheat, to benefit the argument that maybe a trillions and trillions, or a number far bigger than that, a number of random mutations could have possibly created a human being. I'm saying mathematically, that's completely implausible, incorrect, and this is to trick people who don't know any better. And the argument, or just the one example of many that can be put forward, is the example of hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is far too complicated to have been made through random mutations, even if you were to make a trillion a second since the beginning of the universe. And I've given very simple mathematical explanations, like given the length of the age of the universe, seconds and nanoseconds, whatever, you couldn't have enough mutations. It's just the belief through not knowing enough, that people believe in evolution through random processes.
There's 2 points here. So we've got back to evolution and then the Big Bang. So let's just, since we have this verse in front of us, let's address that, and then I'll go back to since we already talked about evolution, I guess I'll hit that, and then we'll go to the verse so I can stay on track here. So when it comes to your mathematical model, because I've heard a number of evolution deniers actually make this claim, but mathematically, are you familiar with what's called the LLN? The law,
No. What does
the
it
law
mean?
of large numbers.
Okay. Can you explain?
Yeah, for sure. So the law of large numbers
Yeah.
actually completely refutes the idea that it's mathematically impossible. The law of large numbers states that basically when you have the probability of a particular event increases the number of chances, the number of executions. So if you threw a dice one time, a 6-sided dice, and you're hoping to get a 6, you have a 1 in 6 chance. But if you throw that same dice a million times, you're going to get a 6 X number of times statistically, right? So the more times you throw the dice, the greater your probability goes up. And there are I can't remember the number. It's an incalculable number in 1 cubic meter of how many molecular collisions there are. So when we start talking about evolution and change over time, the number of molecules, the number of atoms, the number of processes that are actually happening on the Earth alone, forget the entire universe, it is incalculable. We don't even have a word to describe the number that we're talking about. Think of the biggest word you've ever heard of, a gazillion or whatever it might be. Even that is nothing compared to how many of these collisions are happening all over the earth. So the law of large numbers says there's plenty of opportunity for all of this to happen. And then when you factor in, like I said before, the random mutation is random. However, hereditary traits are not random and environmental pressure is not random. Both of these are selected for. So mathematically, there's no problem with a natural process, mathematically speaking. That's just a simple mathematical fact. So when people say it's mathematically impossible, it's because they don't understand the law of large numbers and they don't understand that randomness.
There's no law of large numbers. It doesn't actually make any sense what you just said. I don't want to be too harsh about it, but like there's basic probabilities. You do things more often, yes, there's more chance. I'm saying there isn't enough time, just given basic maths, and maybe we can go over the basic maths, right? Enough time to even create a single hemoglobin. You need about 300 million, 500 million to make a drop of blood, right? This is something that Richard Dawkins goes over in his book, The Blind Watchmaker, right? So like really we could go into detail into that if you like, but quite frankly, that there's no law of large numbers that suddenly makes all probabilities suddenly change. That's a belief that you've got, but it doesn't actually make any sense. Why? And the idea, yes, we all know there are lots of things, interactions and possible things happening in our environment all the time, but that doesn't actually make things more plausible. It makes things, by the idea of entropy, that makes things more plausible that everything's going to decompose and decay and self-destruct any moment. That's what it means. That's the whole idea of entropy. So the fact that there are more things happening, it just means that you're rushing towards destruction, but yet you don't have that destruction. That's just another argument for the existence of God. So that's what I'm going to say about that.
Yeah, I would encourage you and others to actually Google and research what the LLN actually is for yourself, because it certainly.
But when you make an argument, you have to make sure that it has some. It's not just like, here's an argument, I believe this. That's a belief system that you just put forward. But if you cannot kind of logically explain it, all you've said that is just when you roll more dice, more things are likely to happen. Sure, right? That's going to happen, right? But I'm saying there's not enough time in the universe for that many generations of mutations to even create a drop of blood. That's what I'm saying. So we could go into that a little bit, but I kind of want to, maybe we'll focus maybe on a mathematical explanation of how it's impossible, because I think that's one of the big problems, right? That people still believe that, yes, we've got loads of time. No, we don't have loads of time. Like if you restart the universe, that means you restarted the clock, and especially if you have very basic elements, you really have started from the beginning. So you can't just say we've got endless or infinite amounts of time to create a human being. So we kind of maybe need to sit down and just mathematically look at how impossible it is, how complex living things are, and demonstrate that it's basically impossible.
Let me just really quick so you understand where I'm getting some of this information. So
Yeah.
in a large population, random fluctuations in allele frequencies, they call genetic drift, have a smaller relative impact. The LLN, which I'll use from here on out as the law of large numbers, ensures that the long-term average of allele frequencies reflect the true underlying distribution, making it easier to detect consistent patterns of selection. Evolutionary changes is measured as changes in allele frequencies. In a small population, random events can cause large misleading shifts in frequencies. The LLN helps ensure that in large populations, observed changes are more likely to reflect true selection pressures rather than random noise. Predicting long-term trends, the LLN underpins the idea that over many generations, the proportion of individuals with certain traits will approach the proportional predicted by selection and inheritance rules. This is why evolutionary predictions, for example, Fisher's fundamental theorem, rely on large sample assumptions, population genetics, and the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium. In the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, allele frequencies remain constant unless evolutionary forces act. The LLN supports the idea that in large randomly mating populations, without selection, mutation, or migration, the observed genotype frequencies will be closed match and expected proportions. And that's just evolution. You can apply the same to abiogenesis. The LLN provides a statistical framework for understanding how over vast numbers of random molecular events, the average outcome becomes predictable. In abiogenesis, it supports the idea that given the enough time and right conditions, rare but possible molecular products could accumulate to form building blocks of life. So this is actually, there's references to this.
Did you fully understand what you wrote, first of all? Or you just read?
As I explained it to you before.
I'm not sure, because it sounded like the belief system, circular belief system.
As I explained it before, and I'll try to dumb it down again. The LLN, what it's saying is the more you increase the chances, right, the higher the probability goes up mathematically. This is, if you study math in college, this is one of the first things they start to teach you is LLN and probabilities. So as I said before, if you take one dice and you throw it once, you have a 1 in 6 chance. You throw that same dice a million times, you're going to get a 6 X number of times. It's going to grow exponentially based on the number of chances, right? So you're saying that time doesn't allow it, but then you have to calculate how many molecular collisions are happening over what period of time. So if you've got a document that proves that, then you would be getting peer-reviewed journals put out. You'd be able to refute evolution, and you'd be a millionaire.
A document. I mean, a document to refute what? Some claim that you can that there's a special number where probabilities change.
If you can prove that mathematically it's random mutation cannot lead to selection, right? That environmental pressure cannot account for this. And mathematically, it's impossible because maths can always be proven. That's the beauty of mathematics. So if you have a mathematics proof,
the theory of evolution is not law, first of all, which is very different. The theory is very different from law. So it's a belief system that it can be random processes. It's a belief system. There's no disproving it. It's not even proved. It's not demonstrated.
Well, okay, so in science, actually, theory and law can actually be the same thing. It just depends on what field you're talking about. Theory is the strongest position that we have for a current understanding, depending on the field. Law can be the strongest position that we have, depending on the field. So in mathematics, oftentimes we have certain laws, and then we base everything on that until it proves to be not dysfunctional. Then we have to assess, why is this dysfunctional? Is the law broken, or is our approach to the law broken, so on and so forth? So for example, we have the laws of physics, right? Einstein's relative laws of relative physics. We can only go back to the Planck temperature. So we can't say what happened before the Big Bang. However, all the laws of physics for large molecular processes hold true, right? The first law, second law, third law, fourth law of thermodynamics all hold true up until you go into the quantum field. Then we have quantum laws and so on and so forth. So those laws are very solid. Theories, on the other hand, deal with different fields. They have the same strength. A law and a theory can both be equally as strong. As far as that. Second, in the field of science, a lot of people don't understand that science is actually, when you have a hypothesis, before you get to the state of a theory, the goal of the hypothesis is to actually, through experimentation, disprove the hypothesis. You're not actually out to prove it. you're attempting to disprove it, which sounds counterintuitive, but this is the way that scientific method actually works, how experiments actually work. You attempt to disprove your hypothesis. When you can no longer disprove it, then you know it holds up to a theory. And it's always an open, science is an open field. So anybody, anywhere, at any time who has the brain power to do it can literally attack any scientific theory and disprove it if it's possible, right? So
there's a very quick response to disprove like the illusion that you can somehow create things through random processes. Like, first of all, we don't have any experience of that. We've never seen something we know that being created with an intelligent design to be created by some sort of random processes. But very quickly, we've got powerful computers, and we cannot create. If we put random processes in a simulation, what we'll get is a mess. There's a game of life, for example. All you get is a mess. Yeah. There's no demonstration. This is what Richard Dawkins tried to do. He tried to do a demonstration of evolution, but he couldn't, and he had to cheat. If you read his book, he didn't tell you he's cheating, but it's one of the many tricks he applied. He started hand picking. He was the hand of God. He was the intelligent creator that he was trying to pretend did not exist. So you can even see like his failed attempt to do a simulation of evolution. You cannot simulate it. You've got super powerful computers. Why can't you, if it's not all that complicated and you can do trillions and trillions of mutations, in a simulation very easily, why can you not create anything useful? And everybody knows, anybody who's a programmer will know that, and I'm a programmer and also a maths teacher, by the way, that you will absolutely just get a pile of junk. Like, we know that intuitively as well.
I think, like I said, I think there's ample evidence. Like an abundance is one of the most well-evidenced theories that we have, is the theory of evolution. And again, when you say random, we have to understand which part of the process is random and which part is controlled. So, are you familiar with like the Uri?
I've already responded to the fact that wind, rain, and all these so-called environmental pressures are not constructive, but they're destructive. It doesn't actually make sense. From our own experience, you put a microchip or any sophisticated creation in the open air, it will not produce anything better. It will be destroyed. That's our experience. So these are just illusions, and we have to be really careful not to impose our belief systems, our atheistic belief systems, because that they don't actually stand with reason or experience. There's no experience that tells you what you're saying actually stands up. There's no experience that tells you that random processes like wind, these so-called environmental pressures, they sound good, but if you delve into them, they actually make no sense. I want you, because I think you're quite a reasonable person, I want you to reevaluate these belief systems, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I'm always trying to make sure that I'm following the current science, because I do put my trust in science and the scientific method.
Yeah, I want you to not just put your trust in science, but actually think about what I'm saying, and can you see the flaws?
Yeah, no, I'm listening to yeah, I'm absolutely listening and considering everything you're saying, but I'm hearing a lot. And I'm not trying to be too harsh on you, brother, but when you say things like it's mathematically impossible, I know that's just demonstrably false, because I know mathematics.
You haven't demonstrated it as false, but also you haven't responded to the point I'm making, which is you put a microchip or anything complicated in rain, put it out to give it open to environmental pressures, you're just going to get destruction. And that's the whole concept.
Yeah, but that's what we would call a non sequitur. A non sequitur is something that doesn't logically follow. So we wouldn't expect to put a silicone microchip out in the rain and expect it to produce an apple, right? What we would expect to do is have an organic apple seed put into the soil, and then have rainfall on it, and then have sunlight hit it, and then get a tree that produces an apple. That's perfectly understandable. The environment.
That's like a circular argument. You've already started.
No, I haven't made a circular argument. Where's the circularity there?
The circularity is that you've quoted the seed, which is incredibly complex organism designed to grow within certain circumstances, right? We have to talk about things that they're not adjusted for these things already and doing what you expect them to do. Of course, they're going to be positively affected by rain, water, whatever. That's what they're designed for. We're talking about things that you're saying. I'm telling you that let's consider our experiences of things, like to what extent do mechanical things that we know, uh, of like chips, microchips, and whatever, that are not already designed for wind, rain, whatever, to make them grow, put them out, let the natural processes affect them, and you will have destruction. You can't say
Yes,
it's non sequitur.
right.
What you
Yeah,
have to
that's
say is that's
non-sequitur
an
'cause
argument against
like they're not
your
designed
point.
for it, so we would expect it to not work because it's
Yeah, but
not.
that's the whole point of everything. Before they're designed for it, um, you're saying that there will be a natural process which will make them fall into place, make them better. But I'm saying there is no example of that.
Well,
That's what
there
I'm
are
saying.
countless examples. Evolution is, as I said many times, very well evidenced. It's the most, probably one of the
Look,
most well evidenced.
evolution just simply means no. But you're making like a. I'm not saying that there isn't.
Oh, are you
You
talking about
know,
abiogenesis?
evolution.
Are you talking about
No, no,
abiogenesis
no.
or
I'm not.
evolution?
We're not. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that we already know that evolution, at a basic level, all it means is that there are steps. Things that suddenly appear. You don't have a whale come from nowhere. There are lots of steps to creating the whale. What I'm saying is that we don't have any experience of mechanical things being made by these evolutionary processes. Wind, rain, etc., the sun are not productive processes that we can see. But anyway, I don't want to repeat that.
Sure. No, no,
I
yeah,
think
yeah. I think we both laid
people
out
are
our.
smart enough to
Yeah,
make their own judgments.
I think we both laid out our case as well as we can, and let the
Yeah,
audience. They can. Oh, excuse me.
yeah,
They can. We can let them figure it out for themselves. They're grown adults and they can do their own research.
yeah.
And I'm not here to try and convince you or anybody else. Just lay it out as I know, to be fair and honest to you, and say this doesn't make sense to me or this does make sense to me. And you've laid your case out very well, I think. And you're welcome to add anything to it throughout the conversation, brother. I'm certainly not wanting to cut you short. So
Thank you. I just want to wind up because we're kind of like, I want to keep it roughly to an hour. Because
we're over that. Yeah, we're well over that.
Poor kids are I'm surrounded by kids that are trying to keep quiet.
Yeah. Let's just hit this really quickly, and then we can close it out here. So we don't leave it just hanging here. We got this the Big Bang, right?
Sure.
So I'm going to read this again here. Do disbelievers not realize that the heavens and earth were once one mass when we split them apart? And that is what you're saying is the Big Bang?
Yeah.
So let me see if I could just read what Big Bang cosmology says, and we'll compare it. The rapid expansion of matter from a state of extremely high density and temperature that, according to current cosmological theories, mark the origin of the universe. So I'm not saying anything about expansion or speed.
Everybody knows expansion is part of the Big Bang. How can you not see that?
I agree.
You're not being fair right now.
I agree. Expansion is in the Big Bang cosmology. I don't see expansion in this Surah 2130 anywhere. It says we split apart the heavens and the earth.
Split apart. What happens?
So when we split,
you have to have a starting point, right?
Split means to divide into two pieces, right? Mm-hmm. So we split them apart. That's two pieces. So the Big Bang isn't.
I think to say that you don't see anything there and you can't see the obvious picture being created, I think that's bias.
Have you heard of Taoism?
Yeah. Yep. But I can't remember any particular detail of it. Certainly heard of it. Yeah.
So in Taoism creation cosmology, it actually states. So let me read their definition of creation. Pangu grows continuously, influencing the expansion of the universe. Each day, the sky moves away from the earth by one zang. The earth widens by the same amount. The Pangu grows taller by one zang. This reflects the Taoist balance of yin and yang. So this definition is significantly more applicable to how they describe Big Bang cosmology than what we read in the Quran, right? You have expansion. You have the
Okay.
moving of the earth away, continuous moving of the earth away from the universe, the sky, right?
No,
Which is
I
what
mean, we don't. I mean, that's like an Earth-centric belief you have. We don't believe that the Earth was the beginning of the universe. Like that is really not the Big Bang. The Big Bang didn't. The Earth didn't. The Earth was not that closed up mass. When it says that, maybe you misunderstood the whole idea of the heavens and the earth. So the heavens and the earth is like all creation was in this small thing, and it wasn't, that small thing was not the earth. So this description that you're saying everything is moving away from the earth, that is anti the Big Bang. I don't disbelieve that it's possible that previous godly teachings, and I believe that God has always been helping all of humanity throughout the time, could have possibly. I don't disbelieve that God could have revealed something useful for people to believe in the future. That, oh yeah, this comes from God, right? So I'm not saying that it's impossible for other religions to have ideas like the Big Bang. Like, I'm not anti that, because I believe all religions, long-term religions, whatever, uh, came from God, because God has always been helping people. So that's not really an argument here or there. But that particular description really does not sound like the Big Bang, because it sounds like things moving away from Earth. There was no Earth in the beginning of the Big Bang.
No, the very beginning is what they call the cosmic egg, but it has Big Bang terminology, was what I was trying to highlight here, like
Yeah, but
expansion.
I wouldn't say. I think I,
Uh,
I, I would. I would say, because I'm trying to wrap this up. I would say
yeah,
read this again, because the idea that everything moving away from the earth is not really in line with the concept of Big Bang. And I'll read this. I would say this very much. This the Quran is not just using up one verse of many verses to quickly allude or describe a point, which is very easy to see that it's much like the Big Bang. So to say that it's nothing like the Big Bang, or it doesn't seem like the Big Bang, I think might possibly, and we all have our biases, demonstrate some level of bias, because it's quite simple and it's unusual. It's a really unusual idea before we were told of the Big Bang. Even as I said, Einstein really didn't like the idea of the Big Bang because it sounds so impossible. So that's what I want to say about that, and let people think what they want. Can I just quickly get to the last point and then spend a few minutes on it? Is that possible? I'm sorry to rush
yeah,
you.
no, that's okay. I could touch
Yeah,
it. Let me write this down so I can bring it back up when
yeah.
like
And
it.
maybe we'll
Because
pick, like, if there's a
I could
really
see how people would want to read into it to see that, but
yeah.
I just read the Big Bang cosmology and this side by side, and none of the vernacular from Big Bang cosmology is found in this surah. However, when I read
Okay,
the
nice.
Taoist creation
Okay.
myth, you actually get similar vernacular. So it would seem, if I was going to say, oh, this is somewhat, and I don't think the Taoists are describing necessarily the Big Bang either, but I think at least it's much closer to what we would expect to see the Big Bang. If you're saying the Big
To
Bang is
say
in the,
none is so extreme that would actually demonstrate bias. To say none,
I
it's like,
literally just
what was
read
the
them. I literally just read them to you.
yeah.
And there, can you tell me one word that's in the Big Bang cosmology that's in that
Okay,
surah that
so
I'm
didn't
not
you
seeing?
say what was the beginning of your description of the Big Bang?
The rapid expansion of matter from a state of extremely high density and temperature.
So rapid expansion of matter. So there was matter in the beginning, and we know that, like, we know, like, maybe from the general definition of a Big Bang, right? That it was a very tiny matter. It was certainly was not a big matter, a big sizable piece of matter, right? Yeah. So it started off with a small bit of matter and expanded. Like, uh, I think it's pretty easy to kind of put the
Who,
dots together and
just really
realize that,
quickly, who are the we that created? It says we split them
it's
apart.
yeah.
Who's all doing this?
So first of all, like, the we is can be considered two ways. So we is the royal we, like the king and queen. We say we do this, we do that. That's one general understanding of it. And also, God uses mechanisms called angels. And angels are just mechanisms. They don't have to be. They're not really like the angels you might see in churches where they have certain wings or whatever. They're just mechanisms by which God implements natural laws. So
Interesting. I'm honestly, I'm not quite following that, and you don't have time to probably explain it. I'd love to figure that out because that is really interesting. Okay, so what? Let me get up to the thing here so I can type in the correct surah. Okay, what is it now?
So chapter 12, verse 43, please.
Did you say 14?
43.
Oh, I'm sorry. 43. So 12:43. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think, it's still on the screen, so everybody should be able to read along with us here. And one day the king said, I dreamt of 7 fat cows eaten up by 7 skinny ones, and 7 green ears of grain, and 7 others dry. Oh, chiefs, tell me the meaning of my dream if you can interpret dreams.
Okay, cool. So very briefly, what's happening here is they're referring to the leader of the Egyptians at the time of Joseph, and it says Yusuf, that's the Arabic for Joseph, Prophet Joseph. And that has only been quite recently discovered that there was not a pharaoh, but a king at his time. And the Quran does talk about the pharaoh at the correct times, like at the time of Moses. So and that actually fact checks the Bible, which mentions there being a pharaoh at the time of Prophet Joseph. So this is just like another category, which I call like the historical accuracy maybe category of proofs that this book is from God. And it's particularly interesting because many people who don't know much about the Quran and they just read anti-Islamic websites, they quickly go to them and they say, oh, the Quran is just a copy of the Bible. Clearly it's not, because it's correcting mistakes in the Bible.
So I just want to make sure I'm following what you're saying here. You're saying that in here is the word Pharaoh, and Pharaoh was first understood by the writers of the Quran.
No. So in here you will see that the word king is used.
Yeah.
And king is referring to the leader of the Egyptians at the time. And he was a king, not a pharaoh. It's a different sort of leadership, different title. So in the Bible, for the same scenario, for the same point in time, same story, because some of the stories are repeated, okay? The same story about dreams and things like this 7 fat cows, etc. The Bible incorrectly says Pharaoh rather than king. So do you understand the Quran is correcting the Bible?
Correctly, and I'm not 100% sure because I haven't read the Quran, but it seems to me that this is a reference to the book of Daniel.
You could say that, right? So whatever, but we know that the Bible talks about the same stories.
I believe it was Nebuchadnezzar that Daniel prophesied to Nebuchadnezzar.
No. This is something else completely. This is the prophet Joseph, and he interpreted some dreams.
I might be misremembering. I might think of a different prophecy from Daniel. Was that? I should look this up. Okay, go ahead.
It's going kind of unnecessary. We kind of focus on like the main point. The main point is that both the Quran and the Bible talk of this particular story, this scenario, but the Quran makes an adjustment. And the adjustment is it says king, not pharaoh. Yeah.
So what period?
Correcting it, and technically, historically,
what period of history is this referring to?
The time of Prophet Joseph.
Which is
pre-Moses. This is thousands of years ago. I can't remember exactly how many thousands of years ago. But the point is, you can fact check this very easily yourself. Say, was there a pharaoh at the time of Prophet Joseph? And we have, it's only been recently found out when we could understand Egyptian hieroglyphics. And for that, we required the Rosetta Stone, which helped us translate many things. And that's kind of I don't know how many years ago, but less than 100, 50, 60, 70 years ago, we found the Rosetta Stone. So that's a really simple argument, I would say. But maybe there's some confusion about it. Do you understand that the Quran is differing from the Bible and is historically correct when the Bible is not historically correct?
Well, I'm not surprised to find the Bible is not historically correct. A lot of people misunderstand. Think that, or make the claim that the Bible was written thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, but it's actually not true. The Bible was probably mostly compiled. In particular, we're talking about, I think this is going to be in the, if it's Joseph, then yeah, you're right. I'm sorry, I got confused about Daniel. That's a different prophecy. Joseph, yeah, that would be in Genesis, right near the beginning. And Genesis was most likely written during the Babylonian exile or the Persian period, which is way, way, way more contemporary than what people, say it was. It was supposed to be written about a time in the long past. It's actually compiled during the Babylonian period. So the term Pharaoh would have been in common usage when the Bible was written.
Great. And interestingly,
when the book of Genesis was written.
Yeah, and interestingly, although the Quran does talk about Pharaoh in other parts, it doesn't talk about Pharaoh in this particular point in history. It talks about maybe at the time of Moses, right, which is a very different time. So
yeah, it would be like around the turn of the around the turn of the millennia.
Yeah, but do you get the point that first of all, the Quran is not just a copy paste of the Bible, and it also corrects. Well, in this particular example, and if you don't know about that, we're not supposed to be historical experts, but these are easy things to check. So if it was true, isn't it, I don't know, remotely interesting that it corrects them? This is just one of many examples that I can provide of evidence of the Quran. These are just 3 simple points that I'm putting forward of different categories of evidence to provide that this is from God.
That is very interesting. Yeah, Joe. So
I heard this is one of many conversations. What I'm
yeah,
this is just like an introduction.
That is true. So I did double check myself. That is true. Joseph, I said around the turn of the millennium, around the 18th century before the Common Era. So 18th century would be around 1700 BCE. So that would be, and that actually was probably before even Egyptians were using the term Pharaoh, because the term Pharaoh came around during the New Kingdom, because they used to have kings. It was divided, Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt, and there was actually 2 different kingdoms in Egypt. Then it was eventually united to one kingdom. So at that point, I believe somewhere in there is when they started using the term Pharaoh. I have to look up the actual date for that, but it's going to be close to that timeline. But Genesis being written during the Babylonian exile or even in the Persian period, when the term Pharaoh was all that was being used, if they were trying to get people to understand who they were talking about, it wouldn't surprise me that they would use the term Pharaoh. But yeah, interesting. And so the Quran being written, when the Quran was actually written, like in the 6th century of the Common Era, 5th or 6th century.
Yeah, and the fact that the Quran was written 500 years ago is no bearing on the fact that it got it correct, because nobody knew that it was a king rather than Pharaoh. It was a king and not a Pharaoh until less than 100 years ago. So there's no bearing on the fact that it's a few hundred years later. That's not a reason to believe that they should have got it anything more correct about this point in time. Does that make sense? That the fact that it's 500 years later after Jesus is not an argument to say that it should improve on the story.
I wouldn't even get into that necessarily, because I could see it working both
just
ways.
Logically, if we let's say you, I'm not lying about these basic premises that we only found out about when Egyptians starting using the term or the title of Pharaoh. We only started, when was the Rosetta Stone? Was it 70 years ago? Maybe we should ask AI, but it's certainly not like 1,500 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. So my point is that hopefully you're not arguing, or maybe nobody else is arguing, that the fact that the Quran came out 500 years after the Bible, that somehow that's the reason in any way, shape or form that that's the reason why it has improved or corrected the Bible in this particular instance. That's not an argument, I would say.
Yeah, I don't think, to be honest with you, brother, I am not following the comments. I'm trying to focus, just really be polite and focus on what you're saying.
No, I'm saying for me, because I think you suggested something like that before. Maybe you're suggesting.
No, I didn't say anything about the timeline of as far as what I did say just to be clear, is that it doesn't surprise me that the authors of Genesis would use the term Pharaoh, being that by the time Genesis was written, it was established that this is what we call the Pharaoh, or what the title of the king, the quote unquote king was actually Pharaoh. So it wouldn't surprise me that Genesis would say Pharaoh in there, you know what I mean, in the way that's written. And I don't know what the oldest version or the oldest text says, like in the Dead Sea Scrolls, for example.
Yeah.
In the original, I don't know if it says king or Pharaoh. I don't know how it was written, so I honestly couldn't say.
Yeah, I can imagine in the Dead Sea Scrolls.
I do see one thing that does. I'm sorry, brother. I do see one thing that needs to be addressed here, because this is really inappropriate. Not on you, but this is the kind of crap that happens when religious people like Claire can't make an argument. So she says, Khalid does not know that he has stumbled into a nest of Islamophobes who will reject everything he says because they hate him for being brown and Muslim. So this is really toxic. You and I obviously have our disagreements here, but I'm absolutely 100% confident that you don't think that me or anybody else in this chat is disregarding you because of the color of your skin. That is insane. For one thing, I don't believe that. That's crazy. I can't believe that she would.
And it's actually anti-Islamic to believe that, because we're told not to judge people's intentions. So
that's crazy. I just literally had an author. The brother's name is Jay Charles. He's not only black, but he's homosexual. I had another gentleman she knows who is a gay married man, homosexual, both of them were featured guests on my channel. We had lovely conversations. Nobody in my chat said anything about their skin color or about their sexual preference or their sexual identity or whatever it might be. So what she's doing here is basically trying to poison the well and make it seem like she's surrounded by a bunch of racists and haters because we simply have a disagreement. This is the kind of stuff that is unacceptable. And Claire probably needs to be banned from the channel if she's going to talk like that. That is really disrespectful.
Claire, don't get yourself banned from another channel. It's not good. Just tone it down. Gosh.
I've never banned anybody from my channel. I don't even think I've muted anybody, maybe once. I just can't believe that she would just start calling people racists because we have a disagreement. That's insane. I think you and I have had lovely conversations, Khalid. And even though we have a lot of disagreement here, I think you and I have had every conversation we've had has been very enjoyable for me. And you've been a welcome guest on my panels. I invited you here knowing full well that the color of your skin was different than the color of my skin. And that never came up in a conversation, you know. In fact, I've been very complimentary of your fashion. I said last time I saw you on a thing, I said, man, brother, you look so good in that shirt. I don't know if you remember me saying that or not.
Yeah, you're very good. I mean, I feel like I should be saying brother as much as you should. I like to compete in good things. There's another Quranic teaching. So I think the way you talk is very polite. I think Claire's point is she should make more precise arguments. And so my more precise argument is, like, sometimes you would say something, I cannot see, how this is, a point. I don't understand a point. And I would say you seem to have a bias because you cannot see kind of clearly I've mentioned this X, Y, and Z, right? So we should be precise in that, but we shouldn't be saying we believe that this person's skin is brown and therefore he believes this, but we don't have evidence for that. So, and the Quran teaches us not to judge people's intentions, and so that would be an un-Islamic idea.
And would you tell me that you say, hey, brother, I think you have a bias, or I think that you're not seeing this correct or something? I do not get offended whatsoever. You have every right, for one thing, to say what you want to say, just like Claire does at the end of the day. But what you say, just because you disagree with me or you think I might be ignorant, and which ignorant is not the same thing as stupid. So if you say, hey, brother, you're ignorant about evolution, or you're ignorant about the Quran or whatever, I would say, you know what? You're right. I need to be humble and admit that I am. I'm not a biologist. I don't have any degrees in theology. So I have to be honest and humble and accept that criticism, right? Because that's true. And not be offended by it. So same thing with me. The situation is reversed. I say, Khalid, I think that you're not understanding what the law of large numbers, how this actually applies to this. And you say, hey, you know what? I don't think it does, but I'll look into it. Or maybe we're not communicating correctly, or whatever you might say to that. But what you're not saying is, man, you don't be such an Islamophobe, Daniel. That's terrible for you to say this. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, that is such a straw man. It's not strong. It's not only it's a red herring. It's not even just a straw man. It's actually a red herring. And it's also what's called poisoning the well. this is the problem, that when we get into these conversations, and this is why, frankly, brother, I don't really have a lot of these conversations with people, because what Claire's doing here is what ends up happening is people start lashing out at each other. And it's not always the theist. It goes both ways. The skeptic and the theist can start finger pointing and just bashing people, attacking them on a personal level. And there's literally no need for that. You and I can just agree to disagree and say, you know what, despite this, I really appreciate the fact that you took time away from your family and your busy day and those crazy frogs and everything in the background to spend time with us today and to help share some information. And I'm very grateful of that, sincerely. And we could just leave on
I'm
that.
grateful. Yeah. So I just want to like say that how I'm incredibly grateful for yourself to give up your time and I listen to ideas that are very different to what you think are my ideas. I think you listen to them patiently. I think we have at times agreed on many things. And so I really appreciate the way you are respectful. And I think I haven't have much time to read the comments today. Normally I do.
Yeah.
Um,
Do you
but
want to
yeah,
breeze through and look and see if there's anything in particular you want to address? I'll go ahead and take this off here for now. And then what I'd like to do, brother, is
yeah,
like I always do, give you a chance to have like a closing statement uninterrupted. You can say whatever you want about whoever you want. I'm not worried about you.
sure.
And then I can open up the panel for other people to join. I understand your time is done here. You're welcome to stay, but if you feel like you have to go, that's no problem. But I do open this up to people to join the conversation. And Claire, that goes
Yeah.
for you as well. Just so you know I said I want to ban you because I'm pretty upset about that comment, but I'm not going to ban you. I'm going to let you speak for yourself. And if you want to join this panel and defend that comment or apologize for it, you're welcome to. But Khalid, go ahead and look through the comments. Let me know if there's anything you want me to highlight, and if not, let me know, and I will. I'll give you the floor uninterrupted.
So yeah, so there's one by Skywork says, Khalid, do not take Khalid's explanation as proof of anything other than his own personal beliefs. I'm trying to, maybe I should go in reverse order or something. I'm not sure if you can easily find that, but I mean, you've heard logical arguments, and if you can't follow logic, or say, I'm trying to be as super polite as possible. If you don't listen to logical arguments or cannot see the logic in any of the arguments. I mean, first of all, it's no skin on my back. Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world and it's benefiting people. Like, it's growing anyway. It's like, it's going to succeed as far as I can see. So it's not like skin on my back, but off my back. The point is, like, how can you not see from everything I said as if I'm just been waffling and just saying empty words that make no sense? To make a claim like that, how can I put it without being harsh in any way? It's like, it doesn't sound like you've been listening to the arguments. You got social power, social prosperity charter, something like that. Okay, let me see an argument that I can fully understand. Khalid, so Skyworks again. At least, I mean, I can follow the comments. Like, I can understand your comment. Khalid swallows Islamic apologetics and polemics whole without examining them first to check their validity. So I've given arguments. So I'm not sure on what basis I'm not checking their validity. So I think you need to be giving more detailed comments, Skyworks, to take you more to understand your point of view. Like, these are just general claims that you're making. You're not actually pinpointing how I haven't, like where the logic is failing. You know, I've certainly provided an argument. We've been talking for almost 2 hours, so to say there's no argument at all is, questionable, really quite questionable. Khalid hasn't introduced any complicated. Is this Skyworks again? Maybe I should skip to official secular Quranism. The Quran is the best available guide to humanity. Too bad Khalid wants to introduce all kinds of complicated arguments to that no one will understand. We can try. So
just really quick, I see you guys in the back room. If you can hear me, Scott and Chris, I'm just waiting to bring you up until Khalid has his final word because he's got to go. But I will bring you guys up definitely onto the stage. So I'm not ignoring you back there. Sorry, Khalid. Go ahead, brother.
Sure. You know what? I can maybe briefly talk to Skyworks if he's about to join. I can talk to him. You can make his point to me directly.
No, it's Scott and Chris Moore are in the back room so far. Skyworks. Cool. I don't know if I've had the pleasure of actually speaking with Skyworks. I really appreciate him or them. I don't know gender, but I really appreciate Skyworks. They're on lots of different channels. In fact, I think Skyworks even attend or watches Claire's content, if I remember correctly. I think they've popped in there. But Skyworks is all over the place, and I do really enjoy them. They are, but they're not in the background.
I mean, the thing with Skyworks comments is I'm reading them most because they're kind of like a whole comment. I'm not sure what the other comments are saying. Like another comment is I just wrote one, keep up or something, for example. I think that's a discussion amongst the commenters themselves. So Khalid hasn't even looked at this is Skyworks again. Khalid hasn't even looked at counter arguments and poo-poos them outright. So I have debated for years. I've been at Speaker's Corner, to say that I haven't looked at counter arguments, and it is like demonstrably false, right? You can see my channel, my videos on my channel. So, I'm just saying, like the big numbers argument, the large numbers argument. I'm just saying that objective ethics has the duty to not just make throw out lots of belief systems. That's a belief system, right? He needs to, for us to take them seriously, he needs to be able to demonstrate the logic behind them. Okay, having a bigger number does increase probabilities. We already know that. There's nothing special, particularly about big numbers. Yeah, for example, if that's what you're referring to, Skyworks. So anyway, I really want to say sometimes. I mean, when I was younger, I was a lot more possibly aggressive, and I'm always trying to tone it down. So I apologize if any way I was a bit harsh or just jumping in there. I felt I did need to jump in sometimes every now and then, because sometimes I forgot like the arguments you were making objective, and I just wanted to respond to them as quick as possible.
No, I wasn't offended in the slightest, brother. As I said before, and I said many times, I totally expect these conversations to get heated to a certain degree. And I would say that compared to the conversations I have with most people in this area, if we had to give it a 1 to 10 rating as far as temperature gauge, I don't think we ever got over a 2. You know what I mean? I mean, it was pretty mellow.
Good to hear.
Always simple. Yeah.
But as a Muslim, I'm always maybe my own biggest, how can you say, I'm mostly concerned. I'm concerned about I have to meet God, and God is telling me already in the Quran to talk nicely and politely and lovingly. So if I'm not doing that, I'm more concerned about it than maybe you might be concerned about it. So I'm apologizing just in case, because I have my old habits of being antagonistic maybe, or combative when I was a lot younger possibly. Even then I would have tried not to be that way, because I was always told to be nice when debating. But I could feel maybe there was an inkling of that, and I apologize for that if that happened. I really love being on your channel. I love the time you've given. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. And I appreciate everybody else in the channel. I've already told Skyworks, for example, he just joins different debates I've been on, that he's a regular, and I appreciate him listening. That's of value to me, because the way I understand the way Islam spreads is that people don't necessarily say, oh yes, you're right, whatever, but over time people just at least lend an ear, listen to it. It might have an effect over time. That's not my business of converting people to Islam. That's God's business. He chooses who he shows the path to God. So anyway, in short, I appreciate everybody who is in the channel. Claire is one of my friends. She's always given me a hard time on WhatsApp, and I do tell her that there are different ways of expressing things, and I do think that I think it's incorrect to call people racist and things like that, unless they've actually said that they're racist or demonstrated it in a more clear way or something like that. But yeah, I will say thank you very much and leave it there.
Absolutely. And I really appreciate your time while you're still here. Just to make sure you know, I'll go ahead and, as always, link your channel to the description of the video. If I might have already done it ahead of time, but I'll be sure once I post this to go back in there, and I add links to people who've joined the conversation and so on and so forth. So I'll be sure that your channel link is in there. And I was not able to copy that document you sent me for some reason. It's only allowing me to open it, which is just going to send me into take me off of this. So if you could email that to me, I will actually attach that to the description of the video so people can see exactly what you're talking about. Because I want them to have as much of information as possible so that they can make their most well-informed decisions. You know what I mean?
You're awesome. Thank you very much, brother.
Absolutely. You're always welcome here, brother.
Peace be upon you. Take care.
Okay, gentlemen, welcome to the show. Is anybody, am I missing anybody? Okay. So I think Chris Moore was waiting first. So we'll go ahead and give you an opportunity to speak first, Chris Moore, and then Scott, you're up next. And anybody who wants, Claire, I really invite you to come up here and, you know, put your money where your mouth is, sister. I mean, you've got a lot of mud you're slinging in the comments, and you've said a lot of things about me that are frankly disrespectful and derogatory. And I'd be more than happy to address any of those things personally with you. If you don't feel comfortable, I'm not, you know, obviously that's up to you, but just so you know, I have an open door policy here. All right. Go ahead, Chris. The floor is yours.
Okay. I got a lot of things to say, like in so little time, I'm guessing, but how I essentially viewed the conversation is that with Khalid, and that's just my personal opinion though. Well, more so, but it's there was a lot of fallacy of equivocation which between science and faith, and also the suppressing of evidence fallacy going on. And for my other point is that if we are going to have the discussion of verse by verse, of the Quran having Quranic verses whipped out, since I'm kind of assuming that the majority of us are not from a Muslim background, I think it would be best to bring in the voices of ex-Muslims, i.e. probably Apostate Aladdin, Secular Spirit, or Abdullah Samir, aka the friendly ex-Muslim, probably his wife too. But anyway, because otherwise we're just basically talking to a wall because we're not able to have a proper pushback on stuff like that. Even if it's like we can just say, hey, this verse doesn't really make sense because of that. But it's basically because we don't have the cultural understanding, or I would say more baggage of the understanding that we weren't exactly able to refute said claims properly, even though we could easily do it in a logical sense. When you're talking to theists, well, essentially you have to go from line to line, and with their insert religious textbook. So that's basically one of our blind spot in this conversation, but that's just me.
Thank you very much, Chris. I agree with a lot of what you said there, actually. Not that you need affirmation from me, but yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for that. Scott, you're up, brother.
Hey, Objective Ethics and Chris Moore and everybody out there at YouTube lands, how y'all doing? Glad to be here. Yeah, I enjoyed it for the time I was here. I think I heard maybe half of it. And I don't really have an external critique. When it comes to these things, you want to do internal critiques, in my opinion, because a lot of the comments that you see are kind of critiquing his views from an external point of view. So I like to always call this like needing to take a trip to the ontological optometrist, right? Meaning, you know, if, for example, if you're a materialist and you want to critique a theist argument, for example, well, you don't want to look at their argument through your materialistic, atheistic glasses, because then it's going to be all blurry and hard to make sense of, right? It's never going to make sense. You have to put on their glasses and see it from their point of view and see if it makes sense internally. That's the only real way you're going to be able to really have a meaningful conversation, because if we're all going to start like at different fundamental starting points, we're going to end up at different places anyways. So maybe just look for the internal inconsistencies, which I think OE was driving at in a lot of his points. But yeah, I enjoyed his politeness, his demeanor, the same with OE as usual, you know what I mean? And as far as Miss Claire out there, to throw that in like racism is just muddying the waters. You know, it's just you're trying to deflect from the point and turn people against the atheists because you don't like it. So instead of arguing a point, you want to throw in ad hom attacks to an entire group of people in order to dilute any sort of argument. That way you shut us down effectively. Because why would you want to trust a bunch of racists? Why would you want to listen to what they have to say? Good job, man. That was intelligent. Done.
Yeah, Scott, as usual, that was very well said. And I do want to touch on that, you know, that, and again, Claire, like I said, it's an open door policy here. I'll talk to anybody pretty much about anything. I'm not a sensitive person. I've been through way too much in life to worry too much about what people want to say about me. But I'm more than willing to address it because it's just not productive. And I think you assume way too much about who watches my channel, who supports this channel, because I don't even really think of it as my channel. We're actually coming up. I can't believe we're over 270 subs last time I looked. I've only been at this for a few months. I've gone about 5 months now, but I do it basically once a week, and that's not much content. To see the growth over, I thought we were coming up on 20,000 views. We're well over 21,000 views already. That's just phenomenal. Those numbers are just insane. The reason those numbers are doing so well is because it's a community. And because it's a community, it's full of a tremendous amount of diversity. We have people from all different kinds of races, cultures, religious backgrounds. I see a Catholic brother who's just joined the chat here. I just had a very polite conversation with a Muslim brother. I'm an agnostic. I know that Chris defines himself as an atheist. You know, Scott is a non-dualist. I mean, just this group of people I mentioned right now just gives you an idea about the diversity. And we are all inclusive here. Everybody is welcome, and all ideas are welcome for the most part. You know what I mean? Like I really do open this up. The whole point of the channel and to build this community is to celebrate our differences, not fight over them, right? So that's the whole point, is that we need diversity. We need different opinions, because when we push up against two ideas up against each other, that's how we could see where the truth actually lies. If everybody believed the same thing, we would have very few tools available for us to decide what actually is true or not, right? So we have to have diversity of information, diversity of ideas, diversity of personalities and beliefs, so on and so forth. And so that in of itself is celebrated here. So for you to throw shade on us as a group to imply that there's some kind of bigotry going on here that gets promoted here, that's just being dishonest, and it's ignoring the evidence that's in front of your face. As I said, I just literally 2 weeks ago had a lovely conversation with anti-natalist proponent, the author of a book, Jay Charles, who's a Black gay man. And so to say that I have, or anyone on this channel has a problem with brown people, I just literally had a lovely conversation with Khalid. I call him brother. I've said on this channel many times, I don't have friends or enemies. I only have brothers and sisters, right? I have brothers and sisters who I agree with. I have brothers and sisters who I disagree with. I have brothers and sisters that I love to talk to despite our differences. And I have brothers and sisters that I wish I could disown, but that's all I have. And I think that a lot of the people who support this channel feel the same way. In fact, there was just a comment from one of the brothers, Robin number 2, sometimes I call him, but he goes by Social Prosperity Charter. I'm sorry, I had brain fog there. Social Prosperity Charter, it's his own economic system. He's actually going to be a guest speaker on this channel to talk to you guys about that. And it's very interesting. But he reiterated what I'm saying is that there's only one race. It's the human race. And I think most people who are part of this channel actually believe that. So I'll defend not only myself and my views, but the people who are on this panel right now and the people that are in the chat. So I think that Scott's absolutely right when he says all that's trying to do is just poison the well. It's like a child throwing their toys on the ground and kicking their feet. It literally means nothing if you're trying to have a productive conversation or actually make an argument. Go ahead, guys. I'm just going to open up the panel for you guys to speak freely. Chris, I think you made some really good points. And if you guys want to talk back and forth, the show is yours for a little while.
Hey, Chris, I don't know if you saw the whole debate because I think I missed some of them. What were some of the strongest points that he made that we can kind of go over?
I haven't. Well, I kind of dipped in, dipped out, and it's like it's just, and it's probably just me, but I didn't see valid points that are are conducive to a strong argument to what he was saying. So basically, like, one of the things that he was doing is that the scientific thing where the Big Bang is in the Quran ish that he was kind of smuggling. I felt. Then there was basically the not the atheist part. Well, somewhat of the atheism or scientism fallacy of saying sciences are idolization. Stuff. Sorry if anyhow.
No, I get it. So in other words, you're saying he was kind of doing straw man arguments a lot of times.
Pretty much, and it's it's like the Quran and the Hadiths are basically 700 years old, 800 if we're basically going way back anyway. And it's like the Bible. It's like the Bible. So it's like you're basing your logic upon a X amount of old textbook that you just are for one reason or another built the center of your universe, your internal universe, to be clear. And it's you're just kind of shoehorning this, and this is kind of at the end of the day, it's basically you're putting your confirmational bias.
So yeah, I think I've heard a lot of those sort of things, like a lot of and it comes from every group.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, brother. Just give me one second. Spec Man, I don't know if you can hear me talking when you're in the backstage or not, or if you can see the private chat, but it says your device is not connected. There we go. Okay, you got it fixed. Okay, sorry about that. Go ahead, Scott. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, I was just gonna say, I noticed a lot of that, and so I would to be fair, I would probably tell him, some atheists it is possible that some atheists, maybe you see this a lot, will look at atheism kind of like a religion in a way. Some do. Yeah. Like they look at Matt Dillahunty like their leader, or Richard Dawkins, I think, was the example he gave. And some people do that. That's fair, but to just broad stroke it like that, I think is unfair.
Yeah, and also to put the point on that, he just basically the four horsemen that are mentioned in the Epstein files. Yeah. Well, it doesn't really mean that because they're mentioned on the Epstein file doesn't mean that they have been flown to his island, so to speak. Because
it doesn't bear on the truth of the claim.
Yeah. So it's because they're named in the Epstein files, blah blah blah. They should not be trusted, and I'm at this, it's to the point. Yes, like we shouldn't do that, but at the same time, it's like I don't worship Richard Dawkins because he's the quote unquote leader of new atheism, or even worship the pilgrimage to the braves, to Bennett Hitchens or whatever, just because once upon a time they were the spearhead of the not awakening, but it's like the growing up of aging out of religion type of thing. And I don't know if I'm making any sense here, but yeah.
Yeah.
Let's welcome. I know I said I was going to open up to you guys, but I didn't realize that we had people in the backstage. I'm so embarrassed. I'm really bad at this, you guys. But I want to welcome Nell and also Robin from SPC. Nell, you were technically waiting there longer. So did you want to go ahead and just go around, give each of you a chance to jump in the conversation, and then we'll just
I'll
open
just
it
be
free
right
flow?
back, by the way.
Oh, okay. You got it, Chris. Nell, the floor is yours if you want.
All right. When it comes to what I was hearing, I do agree with Scott. Like, essentially, I feel like a more potent or important critique would be an internal critique, and to try to put ourselves inside the belief system that was being put forward. But what I can also do is critique what was being said about things that weren't in the belief system, such as he seemed to have a very misinformed view on evolution. So it's like there was a lot of things there that we could correct him on, along with him trying to point to atheists in the Epstein files. It's like that just seems like that has nothing to do with the actual arguments, like as others have said. And
Yeah, you're right. And I fully admit that I am not the most well-qualified person to debate evolution. I probably chopped that all up really badly. I don't know. I did the best I could. I wasn't expecting to have a conversation about evolution, so I was kind of flying up there. But yeah, I would refer anybody back to the video I had with Austin Sims a few weeks ago, because that's probably going to be a lot better for you.
No, I mean, I think you did a good enough job. You especially, I mean, you represented the laws of large numbers correctly, I think, and entropy as well. So, but and then just the last point though, that like trying to, it wasn't Khalid, it was Claire that tried to paint us as Islamophobic, and it's like I don't personally care if you call me that, but it's like words, they carry weight, they have meaning. And to just like sling that word around to anyone just because they disagree with you just takes away the meaning of that word. There are actual people who dehumanize Muslims, and that's an awful thing. But it's like just critiquing someone's belief system is not attacking someone, and so try to make that distinction.
Yeah, and that is something I'd like to address really quick. And then we're going to Robin SPC next. But it's that I'm in a very difficult position as the host of the channel, because I personally, it's really hard to offend me personally with words in particular. Even, I mean, I just don't take it seriously. I don't take it personally. I have a very thick skin when it comes to that, because I've been through real struggles in life, and I've overcome so much that somebody calling me anything they want, frankly, isn't really it just isn't going to affect me. And I would encourage everyone to be like that. However, I'm also aware that everybody is their own individual human being, and they have a right to their own feelings. If somebody is going to be sensitive to being misgendered or misidentified or mislabeled or whatever it might be, that's their right to be offended, frankly. I mean, it's not a polite thing to do to people. So if somebody wants to be offended by it, or if it triggers somebody because of their own emotional state, that's not something that I should judge. And so I'm in this really difficult position of trying to open up conversation where bad ideas can be exposed, because if we shut down conversation, we're not letting the bad ideas be exposed, and we can't stamp them out or make an attempt to overcome them. They can grow like a weed underground, like, you know what I mean, like roots that choke out other plants. And so it's a really tough spot for me to be in, to be honest with you. And so I'm always expecting to receive some criticism from both sides of the aisle for being too loose and too forgiving, and also then being too strict, depending on whose perspective it is. So I do just apologize to anybody who watches the videos and they do hear something or see those kind of comments that, like what Claire left, and it does trigger them. I understand and respect you as a human being, that you do have a right to your own feelings. And it's not for me to say, oh, you should toughen up, you know, whatever. The problem I see, and I've mentioned this on other videos, I don't know if I've done a whole video on it, but it's one of the biggest problems that I see. So I think I did mention it. So I did a video on why we should use people's pronouns, preferred pronouns. And the video that I did was basically to highlight the science behind it and the change in my own personal perspective. So I started the video out by talking about respect. Before I had looked into the science of transgenderism, which there actually is, biology and neurology have actually looked into this. So there is hard science that we could use now. But before I knew any of that, the issue to me was just simply about respect. If a person wants to be identified a certain way, we should make an effort to do that. Just like if somebody told me their name was Steve, it would be really stupid for me to start insisting that no, you look a little more like a Derek to me. Like, who the fuck am I to tell them how they want to be called, right? So that's how I always approach the same thing with identity. If somebody wants to be referred to as she, her, or he, him, or they, them, out of respect, we should all do that, in my opinion. But the video talks about the hard science behind it. That now it's not just a matter of respect, but if you actually refuse to acknowledge people's preferred pronouns, you're literally denying science. However, in that video, I talked about the labels and the danger of what happens when we start calling everybody a phobe or a Nazi, you know, like an Islamophobe or transphobe or whatever it might be, or a Nazi or a communist or a socialist, or all these labels get thrown around so flippantly. They no longer carry the weight that they really should. Like if somebody says, hey, you're a racist or you're a bigot, that should really get their attention. And they should stop in their tracks and say, oh my gosh, I don't want to be identified this way. I need to look at my behavior. Why are people calling me a bigot? But nowadays, everybody's a bigot. Everybody's a phobic this, or everybody's you know, whatever it might be. These labels get thrown around so much that it's no longer having the effect. In fact, it's actually having the opposite effect. I know, because I'm all over the web, or social media, there are conservatives who are hardcore, like conservatives, that take being called a transphobe as a compliment, because it means that they've spit out their rhetoric so much, so consistently, that they've really pissed off the other side so much that now they're adopting this label and it doesn't bother them. And that's the exact opposite effect that these words should have. If somebody calls somebody a Nazi, that person should be like, oh, I don't want to be identified with the mustache man. People are literally embracing these titles. So we need to be careful how we use language, because it's like the boy who cried wolf too many times, right? Pretty soon people are like, oh, there's no wolf around, you know what I mean? So that's what I have to say to all that. And Robin, you're up next, and then we'll just open it up.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, I agree with what you just said on that. And society today has even got to a point where we can't even agree on the dictionary's version of a word. And there's the famous that famous bit in the Bible that says, you know, I split up everybody so that they couldn't speak the same language, so that they couldn't understand each other, so they would constantly be at conflict with each other. And it's getting more so. The world's getting smaller. The internet's bringing us all together. We have access to learn other people's languages. A lot of us can speak more than one language, yet we still can't even agree on the word phobia, for example. A phobia is an irrational fear. And even if you do have an irrational fear, people still, like, say somebody's scared of spiders and they live in Europe where we have no poisonous spiders. There is no real reason for them to fear that spider, yet they still do. Yet we can find it in our hearts to empathize with them. So the people calling everybody a phobic, what's wrong with them? First of all, and I don't have any irrational fears. Yet I disagree with so many different people. First of all, I disagree with the atheists because I believe that they're selling a short by not allowing others to acknowledge a power greater than themselves. Yet disagree with everybody that's following some ancient religion because if they did have the answers that humanity needed, they've all been around for long enough to have solved all of those problems. Uh, and I wish there was a one book that was divinely inspired that taught humanity how to live with each other and love each other. There isn't. That's just a fact. There is no book that has taught us to do anything that the books say that we should.
So Speckman, you're a deist, as far as I can understand.
Yeah, I believe in a higher power,
Okay.
and it brings me joy to think that there is maybe something that knows where this whole story is going because I don't know where the story's going. I'm going to live my short lifespan of 100 years and then hopefully move on to something better, but I can't be sure that that's going to be the case. So people that use these books to try to tell other people what they should and should not be doing in their lives, why bother? Just follow your book and shut up. You know? Yeah.
Mhm.
If you're sure it's the answer, then live the answer and shut up. And if it's so good, other people will automatically gravitate towards it. Will they not?
I guess so. Although you're talking to an atheist, or more specifically, an anti-theist. But anyway,
Y- Yeah, but like I said, so there's many good things that anti-theists bring about. They all about taking responsibility for your own actions. Eh? You
yep,
decide what kind of a person that you're going to be. Eh? And
yes,
you use the tools that you've been given in this life the best you can for you and your family. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, you know?
I can
And
agree with that.
yeah, and all of us can wait until we finally depart here to see if there is something or nothing. I mean, I'm a theist, but I'd be so relieved to find out that the day that I fall over and stop moving, that there's nothing, because nothing is perfect. There's nothing to be bad, nothing to be good. It's just nothing. But my problem is I can't even imagine nothing. Eh? In my mind, nothing is still something. I envision a vast empty darkness, which is something, right?
Yep.
So I can't even envision nothing. I've had centuries, eons of generations that have all lived in something. You know, they need to breathe something, they need to eat something, they need to feel something. This nothing is an alien concept to me.
Well, the way how I see it is just I'll be in the same condition as I was a year or even 2 years prior to my birth, meaning that it's just like sleeping. It's just that you're not breathing and you're not thinking. So, yeah, or even aware of it. So, yeah. Anyway,
But yeah, but sleeping allows for the possibility that you might reawaken.
okay. Um,
I don't
all
know.
right.
I don't know. It's just, you know.
I'm
Huh?
I'm I'm just saying what I think. That's it.
Mm.
But anyway,
And the truth is, most of us are quite happy when we're asleep, and we don't even become aware of our nightmares until we get into that waking phase where you're coming back into, you know, wakefulness. Uh, so we could have 100 nightmares, and when we're asleep, we don't even really notice them. It's only when we're in that moment of coming back to consciousness that we even perceive those. So yeah, being asleep's good, you know.
Well,
Yeah.
the good news is that you'll never experience nothing. That's either good news or bad news, depending on how you look at it. Because the only thing that experience knows is experience. That's what's fundamental.
That's true.
If you know, if a local process of an experience, say like of myself, ceases to exist, the experience will just go on in some other form. And so it's like an excitation from the ocean. You know, and the ocean is potential. It's that.
So would you agree if I said that kind of like we are a receiver and the universe is constantly projecting at us?
Similar language. The way I look at it is more like an ocean analogy, where you've got the ocean, say that's reality, and then you've got the little waves in the ocean, and those are just excitations of the ocean. And that's what we are. That's what all events are. That's what everything is. They're just different excitations of the same ocean. You can't pick up the wave and put it in your pocket and walk away somewhere, right? It just ceases. If it ceases to exist, it just goes back to the ocean.
So the ocean is the source, and we are all one.
Well, that's all there is.
The waves of the ocean.
No, that's all there is the ocean.
Yeah, but that would make the ocean everything, and everything that's part of it is all one.
Yep.
You know?
That's monism. That's non-dualism. So whatever that substrate you want to call it, I call it like a phenomenal potential or phenomenal realization of a potential, something like that. So any sort of, you know, reality, any sort of experience that truly happens in reality is coming from that same substrate logically. It's got to logically. But it's just an extension of it, or a fractal of it, you might say.
Why then do you think that human beings have this desire for dualism? We're constantly looking for things that we consider to be opposites, like up, down, happy, sad, fast, slow.
Because that's how the ocean gets to know itself. We're like a mirror. It mirrors itself through each of us and all of us.
I think for me, Scott. For me, the black and white need is basically just like a consequence of consciousness, as in we just basically like absolutely need to have what's right and wrong or whatever. It's just like a logical thing of a shortcut, because having the nuance or the gray, well, basically having like gray zone or like morality and philosophy is basically just, it requires a lot of forethought upon the subject matter. Hence, it's very easy to say, okay, this and this and this is okay. This and this and this is not okay. And see, do you understand what I'm saying?
Well, I would say philosophy people who engage in philosophy shouldn't be in it to close questions. Like the whole idea isn't to say, oh, I figured out reality. It's non-dual, case closed, right? Like the whole idea isn't really to close questions, but to keep them open. So like if I challenge like mainstream ideas like materialism or physicalism or theism, those are mainstream ideas. If I challenge those, I'm leaving the question open. I'm doing my part to open those questions back up, instead of letting them say, no, the answer is God. God did it. Or, no, the answer is physicalism. That's just what it is.
or
But it
more
would
of a
be unfair to say that theists like myself, even
Uh-huh.
though I'm in a very minority group of theists, uh,
Mhm.
that we haven't posed those very same questions to ourselves. I found myself looking for a really good excuse to be an anti-theist.
Mhm.
I constantly am. It's part of knowing yourself, isn't it?
Yep, that I do it too. Like I try to. I even do a whole channel where I invite people to come on and challenge my ideas of non-dualism, idealism. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And I would say another part of philosophy, besides just keeping the questions open, is to look inward and not just audit other people's beliefs, but your own. To
Hmm.
see if you are justified in believing what you are believing.
No, I love how you just said that. And I think that's really important. That it touches a little bit about what Scott was saying earlier. I don't know if you caught that when you're in the back room. Can you guys hear what's happening in the back room when people are talking on stage?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. Good. Good. Okay. So at any rate, now, yeah, Scott was talking about internal critique versus external critique. Sometimes it can be referred to as eisegesis versus exegesis type of thing. Anyway, um, the internal critique is extremely important. I think that if people truly want to improve themselves and their experience in this life, if there's something after that, I can't speak on that. I'm agnostic to all that, but I know that this life is happening, right? So if we want to have any if we want to institute any control that we do have as moral agents over our own well-being, it requires the ability and the willingness to look inside of ourselves and to be critical, right? To be humble and to understand what humility is. Humility is not self-deprivation. That is not the same thing. Considering yourself like filthy rags is not humble. That's self-deprivation, right?
Mhm.
Humility, true humility, is that perfect golden mean that Aristotle talked about, where it's the perfect medium between arrogance and self-deprivation. That's where you find humility, and we all need to adapt that. And part of humility is just what you're talking about: looking inside yourself and saying, "Hey, are my beliefs, are these really founded on anything that I can any kind of firm foundation, or is it just something that makes me feel better? Is it something that I need? And how am I going to approach the outside world understanding this?" Right? Because
Mhm.
I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with believing something that may not necessarily be true. Okay. I don't think it's necessarily, I certainly
Yeah.
don't think it's beneficial, but I
Mhm.
don't think that just if a person wants to believe in unicorns or tooth fairies or gods or whatever it might be, that in and of itself, I don't see as being inherently wrong or
yeah.
damaging. But
Mhm.
how are you going to then express that? That's like my analogy of the
Well,
gun sitting on the table, right? The gun on the
yeah.
table doesn't do any damage to anybody. It's not
Mhm.
until somebody picks that gun up and goes and does terrible things with it that it
Yeah.
becomes a problem.
Yeah, and I feel like a perfect example of this is what Robin and Scott were talking about earlier about dualism and non-dualism. Because even if, let's say, non-dualism is the true position, and Robin asked, well, why do humans seem to be more geared towards dualism than, or look at the world in dualistic ways? Well, to me, it's like, well, that just seems like, that's just evolutionary advantage. Like if we
Hmm.
if we evolved to be more non-dualistic in our thinking, then like the tiger in front of us attacking us would just instead of running away, we would just let it kill us, because it's like, oh, everything is one.
Exactly.
Exactly. I was just about to say something extremely similar. I mean, I've also spent time in meditation thinking, how would a monoverse benefit me personally, and by extension, everybody else? And I do think that a monoverse would benefit us all. I just cannot see that we live in a monoverse. I really do think that we live in a universe. So
Oh yeah. Well, how do you study philosophy at all? Because there's this outstanding problem in philosophy called the problem of the one and the many. Where is reality a singular or is it a plurality? What would you say? You're saying that the universe is you're saying reality is a plurality, right?
Well, I've thought about this, and I know that just recently there were some really smart people that won a Nobel Prize for proving that the local universe doesn't exist. Well, if it doesn't exist locally, then it doesn't exist far away either, to my thinking. So,
Well,
um,
it's not,
but
because
if
far away and
the
close.
universe doesn't exist locally, I know for a fact that we're not sitting in the same room, yet we are both experiencing our own version of reality. The construct around me is at the moment my bedroom, and the
Mhm.
construct around you will be your living room or your kitchen. I don't know. So I do know that we're both experiencing different things right now. So there's more
Mhm.
than one experience happening.
Mhm.
So yeah, if everything's
Sure.
local and it's just me, I must be talking to myself.
No, I wouldn't say that. I would say um, it's very similar to what you see in DID, which is like dissociated identity disorder, where it becomes apparent, like the alters that inhabit one mind, right? Where people have all these different alters, like different personalities, and they obfuscate each other. So when one, yeah,
Scott,
like
just to
when
let you
one
know
person,
that it's essentially referred. They refer well. It's also scientifically referred as systems. Just to let you know.
yeah, fine, yeah, like different system. That's even a better word, actually, and that makes a lot of sense. So each one is its own system, but it's all related to the same consciousness. It's related to that same stream of consciousness, and this actually goes on with everyone. You can see that in split brain patients, where different perspectives can exist within the same stream of consciousness, right? And so that's kind of the analogy of what could be going on in reality on something like non-dualism or idealism, that there's just different, disassociated minds that sort of inhabit the same stream of consciousness.
Okay. Yeah. So, because what Robin seemed to be alluding to is, what is solipsism?
Dualism, yeah.
Well,
Yeah, and
he was
solipsism.
that he was just talking to himself, or but what you're saying though is that idealism is different. That idealists do in fact accept that there is an external world out there, but it's
Correct.
all mental.
That is correct. That is correct. See, idealism or non-duality resolves that one in the many by treating the many as genuine distinctions within one undivided reality. So it's a difference without an ultimate separation. But the separation is what gives us all of our meaning, our value. It allows us to express love. Like if I see my neighbor suffering, I can feed him or help him. And that allows consciousness to evolve, and we see that. So that's just my
But
view.
there is a theory out there that they say that basically everything that is alive is God, and it's just expressions of itself, and it's it having an internal dialogue of how it wants to proceed in the universe. There is that as well. So it's kind of funny that an anti-theist and a theist ideology or system of thought can be so very close to each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the only difference is one is sort of taking that one fundamental, the one on theism is personalizing it, so it's making it more of a caring, loving, and however different, I guess, religions and denominations will define the God differently. Like some will say he's an omni God, some will say he's not an omni God, whatever your definitions are. But it's pretty much referring to the same thing. The difference is with most religions, especially the Abrahamic religions, are very dualistic. So their whole concept is there's the creator and the creation distinction, right?
Yeah,
There's
that's
good,
so
there's
it's so
evil,
funny.
there's the
It's so
dark, the
funny.
light. Yeah, it's very dualistic,
And just
And
recently, I've been learning that humanity measures everything that it seems to know by light. Yet, we know that the universe is mostly comprised out of darkness. And if we measure everything purely by light, how we'll never know everything. It's not even a possibility because there is so much that exists out there that's never been touched by light. So we'll never be able to measure it, no matter how much. And if there is such a thing as God, it lives in both. It lives in the light, it lives in the dark, it lives in what you can see, it lives in what you can't see. So uh, that kind of all of those Abrahamic religions are, even if they were good, they're kind of made for toddlers. You
yep,
know, I
limited.
think
Yep.
I think humanity has evolved past that. And even the machines that we've created that have read pretty much everything that any human bothered to put on the internet, even they agree that we have no need for them. And even anti-theists ask themselves the same big questions that the theists ask. And I think that the theists are remiss in acknowledging that if you're an atheist, you spend as much time questioning the nature of the universe as they do, or maybe even more.
I agree.
Yes.
I want to acknowledge we are the good Lord is in our presence. So everyone just take a minute to just bow down and yeah, Dark Light, since you're joining us, family, you got the microphone right now, just real quick, and then we'll just open it back up to everybody.
Yeah, I've been watching, and I'm kind of driving around in town. I just wanted to pop in real quick. I'm a non-Abrahamic true monotheist. Followers of Abraham are a blood cult of sin worshippers. Yahweh, Jesus, and Allah are desert war gods of hypocrisy, not the actual one true creator. I do believe in a construct of the one true creator. I'm actually creating my own theology and theory. The theology is going to be geared towards theists, and the theory is going to be geared towards atheists and empiricists. And so the book I'm writing is going to be split into two, kind of describing the same thing in different ways for pretty much the left brain and the right brain, essentially. And anyone that would like a copy of my rough draft, I'm going to be done with it here soon. I've been making a lot of great progress on it. And really quick at the accusation of Claire earlier of the homophobe, or not homophobia, but the Islamophobia thing. Do you guys remember a handful of years ago, they didn't say Islamophobia, they said xenophobic. But then people started researching that word and what it actually meant, and they realized that Islam is actually xenophobic, because xenophobia means the hate, the fear of anyone who is a different ideology, essentially. And let's just address the are you guys phobia phobic? It's okay to be afraid of something. Like you shouldn't be you shouldn't be.
You're forgetting it's the
I
irrational fear.
Yeah,
I have an extremely rational fear of Islam, and guess what? Half of the people that are Islamic and live under Islamic rulership have a fear of Islam. My fear is perfectly rational.
and
absolutely.
I have an irrational fear of spiders. So
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. My wife, she hates it so much because I don't like to kill anything if I don't have to, and I know bugs are technically, probably a little extreme on that, but I just prefer to take them outside and live a peaceful bug life, whatever they are. So when it comes to the spiders, my if I don't get it outside, man, that's its ass right there. It's gonna be splattered because my wife will fucking get it's a shoe or something.
I too have lived in a household where as soon as I see a spider, I jump into action like a mad superhero because the people around me will kill it just for existing. So
Yeah.
I sympathize, yeah.
You're
Yeah,
killing yourself.
I just don't think there's any need to, these bugs actually. I try to explain to my wife. I was like, that spider in the house is actually killing like mosquitoes or whatever else might come in here that you don't want around, right? So that spider is actually, we need to live symbiotically with these things. And she just rolls her eyes at me and it says, well, you can take it outside if you want to, or if you don't, he's dead.
Speaking of which,
to clarify, I do not try to kill the spiders. I'll let my wife take care of that.
Fair enough. Very, very. Well, then your fear is not that irrational. You seem like you're dealing with it very well.
Well, as a non-dualist, I'm killing myself all the time. Then.
Yeah. Have you tried exposing yourself to your fear and managing to be in the presence of a spider a microsecond longer than the last time?
No. Although one thing I have noticed is that I have less fear of the fuzzy looking spiders than the ones that are just no fur.
Yeah, thank God. And some spiders have been so thoughtful that they've even actually tried to disguise themselves, maybe because of the universal hate that they receive. They tried to disguise themselves as something else, either a beetle or an ant. I mean, spiders are doing their best not to be spiders. You do know this, guys. I mean, come on. They're working hard.
But then again,
the strange thing about Islam is because I grew up with a hippie mum, and my mum was like, you have to learn every religion, you have to learn every culture, you have to learn how to gather information from all corners of the world because there is knowledge there all over. When I went to school, my best friend, poor guy, all of his families was Muslims as far back as any of them could even remember, and he's like, they all do it, so I'm gonna do it, and my kids are gonna do it. And I'm like, yeah, I get that. I also, when I was living in Spain, I tried to ingratiate myself within the Spanish community in Andalusia, and it was really hard. I didn't have the language, and it was just really, really hard. So I got stuck in that expat zone that you can get stuck in when you live outside your home nation. And the only ones that would accept me in was a Muslim family of immigrants, some of them legal, some of them illegal, and they took me in. They clothed me, they fed me, they found me work. They taught me the basics of Spanish, and they were the most beautiful people in the world.
Yeah, it's really important.
So I have nothing against human beings. I like human beings. We should keep them.
Yeah.
What I've got something against is all of those ancient religions and the Abrahamic ones at the moment. Maybe if I lived in India, it would be Hinduism or Shintoism or that was getting in my way. But at the moment in my life, the stumbling block for all of humanity and the whole of society is, what are we going to do with these Abrahamic religions? Right? It's a problem. It's something that we're going to have to solve because they don't have the answers. Unfortunately, if they did, I wouldn't even be talking right now, but they don't. So they got to get over themselves and shut up.
Yeah, no, there's a lot to be what you said there, and I think it's really important that we make and clarify the distinction. We can talk about the problems with the belief system, and we can even talk about problems with what groups do with this belief system. And there's nothing wrong with that. We should identify these because they can be dangerous. There's the ISIS group, which is an extremist Islamic group that in Iran that burned down the library. And burning libraries to me is one of the greatest tragedies in all of history when we look at, and obviously you have to put human life above that, but destroying information on that level is so toxic and so damaging. I mean, it breaks my heart. It literally almost brings tears to my eyes when I think about the great libraries throughout history that have been destroyed to try to control the narrative. But that doesn't mean that Islamic people are prone to do this. It doesn't mean that Islamic people,
that's another problem. One of the scholars that I like and love because he looks at things very objectively is a guy called Ralph Ellis. and they recently discovered a temple from the 1st century. It was obviously made by people that at least lived within the Jewish community. What do they call that area? The Levant, right? So it was in the Levant. It was in Syria, but it was quite obvious that it had leanings towards Judaism, and basically it was what do they call that? With the Pisces and all of that and blah. It was a big horoscope thing, right? Now, people say it couldn't possibly be Jewish because the Jewish, they don't like iconography in their holy places and all of that, but it truly was, right? And it basically pointed that this guy Jesus wasn't the guy that people thought that they were, because it was built in his time. He was probably one of the people that thought that these, zodiacs were important. They're constantly talking about how the fish is changing to the ram, and that this is all, astrology, right? He was quite obviously talking about it. So ISIS came along and destroyed the one thing, in my opinion, that could put Jesus on a par with their great prophet Muhammad, because Jesus also was quite willing to wage war against his enemies to get what he wanted. So that would finally put Islam on a par with Christianity. Both of them were mini warlords. They were both fighting against their oppressors. I forget which ones Muhammad's were, but Jesus's one was the Romans, right? And that would put them on a par, and it would bring us one step closer to finally putting the whole Abrahamic story to rest. Because this peace-loving, cheek-turning, this guy, that was nothing. That wasn't the real. That was what the Romans turned Jesus into, because it supported their narrative. They were like, yeah, bend the knee to Rome and you'll all be fine. And now Jesus, literally, that's his message. So
Can I
disagree with it.
Let me just take the reins here for a second here. Now, because the topic of the show is based on the Quran specifically, I actually pulled up just a real quick list that has 4 different points that talk about problematic areas within the Quran that I'd like to mention, so that people watching this could, address those if they'd like to, or so it's kind of somewhat on topic. Now, I can do it this one of 2 ways. Either one, I can read through this list. It's not that long. It's got 4 different points, and there's a couple surahs in each point to kind of provide the evidence while you're all here. And if you want, in your closing remarks, you can address any of these points, or I can give you each your final word now and then do this. How do you guys want? It doesn't matter to me either way. I do need to start to try to wind it down in a direction. I figure it's going to take us 15 minutes or longer to get maybe another half hour to even do all that. So would you all like to be present when I read through this? And then if you want to address any of it in your final statement, or do you want to just have your final statement now?
The first thing I would like to say is that StreamYard needs to have a thumbs up system, so that you can put a thumbs up in your little thing, so that you know that they agree or disagree.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'm cool with it.
Okay, why don't I go ahead and let's do that. Let me just read through these, and then we'll go around the room and let everybody have a closing remark, and you can have a few minutes, whatever it takes, and you can address any one of these in particular if you'd like to, and you don't have to if you don't want to, but that way it gives you all the options. Give me 1 second here. All right. So, I just pulled this up off of, this is some kind of quick Google search. And as I tried to make clear at the beginning of this, I've not really studied the Quran very much, especially compared to other religions, in particular Christianity and even Judaism. So I'm not saying this is true or false, and I'm going to give you the sources for this at the end. Okay. But this claims that critical scholars and skeptics have identified several alleged errors, contradictions, and historical anomalies in the Quran. And of course, traditional Islamic scholarship provides counter arguments and apologetics to try to resolve these.
Sharing this?
No, I'm just reading it.
Okay.
Internal contradictions. Point number 1. There's 4 points. Okay. So point number 1 is internal contradictions. Inheritance laws in Surah 4, verses 11 and 12. Specific fractional shares of an inheritance are given to parents and daughters, but critics argue that combined fractions can sometimes total more than 100% of the estate. That's a problem. Creation time frames. Surah 41, 9 through 12 describes the earth being created in 2 days, followed by the mountains and the heavens, taking a total of 8 days. However, Surah 79, 27 through 30 states the earth and heavens were created before the earth. Oh, I'm sorry, states the heavens were created before the earth, causing debate over the sequence of creation. Number 2, scientific inaccuracies. Certain verses contradict modern astronomical and biological understandings, reflecting the prevailing worldview of the 7th century in Arabia. So the sun setting in muddy water in Surah 1886, the traveler Dul Quranyan, however you say that, reaches the setting place of the sun and finds it setting into a spring of murky warm water. Embryology. Surah 23:14 describes human development as progressing from a drop of sperm to a clot to chewed flesh and then bones. Critics state this mirrors outdated Aristotelian and Galenic embryology rather than modern biology. Geocentrism and flat earth. Several verses describe the earth as being spread out like a carpet or a bed and imply that the sun and moon travel in orbits around the earth. Point number 3, historical and factual discrepancies. Some narratives in the Quran differ from the biblical accounts and historical records of the time. The crucifixion, Surah 4, 157 through 158, claims that Jesus was not crucified, but it appeared so to the people. Haman and Pharaoh, Surah 28:6 places Haman, historically known as an official in the Persian Empire under King Ahasuerus in Egypt, as a minister for the Pharaoh during the time of Moses. Ezra, Surah 9:30 alleges that Jewish people claim Ezra is the son of Allah. Historians note this contradicts Orthodox Jewish monotheism, as there is no historical or textual evidence of Jews worshiping Ezra as divine. And the fourth and final point is grammatical irregularities. While Arabic grammar was largely standardized based on the Quran, some Orientalists and critics have identified deviations from standard classical Arabic grammar. Declension. Well, I don't know how to read that. My reading is not very good, apparently. Of Allah Subhanahu in Surah 569, the word Allah Subhanahu, the Sabians, is used with the nominative ending the letter wa when critics argue it should be in the accusative, the letter ya, due to the preposition ina preceding it. For context, the exact same word appears with the grammatically expected ending in Surah 262. Muslims, scholars, and apologists reject the idea that these are actual errors. They explain contradictions through the concept of naksh, which is abrogation, resolve scientific issues as allegorical or metaphorical, and address historical differences by treating the Quran as correcting the historical record rather than relying on prior texts. For an in-depth exploration of the counter-arguments and apologetics, you can consult the Islamic platform Lamp of Islam. For the skeptical and critical analysis of these points, you can read the breakdowns on the skeptical resource Wikislam. Wiki, as in Wikipedia, with SLAM, so Wikislam. So that's the information that I have here. Again, I can neither confirm nor deny any of it because I haven't really looked. Although I will say that apologetics is a standard practice when it comes to defending these claims against various religions. And apologetics as a practice in general is really, really disingenuous, frankly, and ineffective, and a really bad way to approach any argument, because what happens with apologetics is you're starting with your conclusion and then you work your way backwards. And so you engage in what's known as the sharpshooter fallacy, right? You throw everything at the wall, and then you go back and draw your circle over what fits. And that's a fallacious way to make an argument. So apologetics is one of the worst ways to defend anything, any position, in my opinion. And it's really interesting to me that a lot of religious people are actually wearing that like a badge of honor, like literally calling themselves apologists and thinking that's a good thing. So there's some kind of mental disconnect there that either I'm having or they're having, and I'm not sure. It could be a little bit of both. So that's basically what I have for that. I really enjoyed the guest today, but I'll do a closing statement and talk about that. So let's work our way around the room in the order you guys came in. So Chris, you'll go first, then Scott, then Nell, then Robert, SPC, you'll have the final word, and then I'll close it up. So Chris, you have the floor for right now. Anything you'd like to say about it?
I don't really have anything much to say, other than the fact that probably in the future it's best to have a ex-Muslim guest, just kind of covering over this, just to get their opinion in, to balance this out. But yeah. Anyhow, thank you for having me, as always, OE, and everyone. And yeah, à la prochaine.
Cool.
I really think that's a. Oh, I don't know why this is lagging some. There we go. Okay. Yeah, no, that's a great suggestion, Chris. As always, you have a lot of great things to add to the conversation. And having a former Muslim here to address some of these points would have been really beneficial. Unfortunately, my time is limited, and I don't know if I could have actually reached out to some people now I think about it. I do have some friends who, there's another platform that I talk on sometimes. I haven't been there in a long time because my time has just been too limited, but it's called Free for Talk. And I've actually met a lot of wonderful people, theists, deists, atheists, all over the spectrum. And I have a few friends that are former Muslims, and we have actually had these conversations on that platform. And they have literally, jumped all over the Muslim apologist. And and the one friend of mine in particular actually speaks Arabic. So he's fluent in Arabic. He's a former Muslim. He's now he considers himself to be an atheist. And I have watched him absolutely just cook these guys. And it's very much like what you see Justin do regarding the Bible and stuff like that. So you're right about that. That's a really good suggestion. I should have reached out to him. Okay, Scott, you're next, brother. Go ahead and have the floor.
Yeah, man. So I don't know. I was just thinking and listening to all the things you were talking about. And yeah, I kind of agree. It'd be really good to have a scholar to appeal to, because whether the Quran really contains, these internal contradictions, just to be fair, it is a matter of longstanding debate right now, like among critics, like Muslim scholars, historians, philosophers, because different people mean different things by contradiction, right? So I was just thinking about some of the categories like theological tensions, historical passages and narratives that don't match up, or interpretive disputes about like wording or context. Like you had mentioned I think the 2-day creation of the earth and the earth's completion, I think, was a total of 4 because the heavens took 2 years as well, right? Or something like that. Or actually it was like 6 to 8. I think that's the thing. So, but whether that's really a contradiction depends partly on like grammatical interpretation, they would say. Someone could make that case somehow. I don't know. And it's kind of like that with everything. So I don't really know because I'm not really a Muslim scholar or anything like that. People can have their opinion. Of course, my dispute with Islam or any of the religious traditions are for different reasons anyways. So yeah, I think just getting your spirituality from a book is a bit superficial, in my opinion, like in my value system. So, that's just me though. So that's my main thought about it anyways.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. And also, Puggles, as usual, putting out some really great insight in the comments. Really appreciate them stopping by. And this, excuse me, you're right. I have heard M talking on Justin's channel, Deconstruction Zone, as well as on Ian's channel. And he is really knowledgeable. I believe he's a biologist, so he could really address not only the scholarship, the religion itself, having been an ex-Muslim, but then he has the scientific side understanding of things, which I'm not qualified in any of those fields to, so as you guys could, I'm sure, tell by listening to me try to stumble through abiogenesis and evolution. Okay, Nell, I believe you're up next. You've got the floor.
So, the question was asked earlier, what are we to do with these, Abrahamic religions? And to me, I'm an atheist, but, and I'd say, at one point was an anti-theist, but now I'd say my position has evolved to be more a pluralist position. It's like, to me, it's trying to eradicate religion. Religious thought is a pointless exercise. I'd much rather would want to try to live in harmony with people with different belief systems, whether they're Christian, Muslim, Jewish, atheist. To me, the issue isn't, theistic belief itself so much as it's the dogmatic teachings. Like, to me, it's like I have many friends who are Christian, but they also hold progressive liberal views. They believe in the separation of church and state. And there's Muslims out there who hold those same positions. And so it's like, to me, I have no issue with them. It's when there is dogmatism involved where you cannot question this, and the belief is, a lot of these beliefs can be harmful, like with female genital mutilation, or throwing gay people off rooftops. That, to me, that, like, that should be brought to attention, then that should be challenged. But at the same time, I also like, the whole Islamophobia thing, where it's like, to me, a true instance of, Muslims being treated, unfairly is like, take the mayor of New York, where it's like, to me, I kept seeing posts all over social media saying, New York failed to remember, even though it's like the mayor had nothing to do with 9/11. It's like, the only thing is that he was a Muslim, or, or that he is a Muslim, but it's like, everything that he has said about his version of Islam, is very progressive. And so it's this, there's a lot of nuance, and I would say that is what seems to be lost these days, the nuance of belief systems and the stripping of humanity away. And so I would just say that, we need to try to see the humanity in other people and try to see the nuance.
Yeah, that's a great closing statement. I'm resonating with everything you said there. Wesley, I see you popped up in the backstage, brother. I'm actually not going to bring more people on because I'm trying to close the show down. I do see your comment here about Satan speaking to people, and that's very colorful and interesting. Maybe one of these days you'll be able to expand on that. I've interacted with you a number of times, not personally per se, like in lives, but I've in chats before, and you definitely have some interesting views. Which you're welcome to hold. I don't hold them against you, all right, brother? But the reason I'm not going to bring you up on stage today isn't because of your views. It's because I'm just literally trying to shut the show down. So I do appreciate you stopping by. So Robin, SPC Charter, we are at you now, so feel free to have the stage.
I enjoyed all of the arguments that your other guests made, and at the moment I find myself in a point of my life where I'm heavily busy in systems design. I'm trying to have a look to see if I could create a better system for economics for my own country, the UK. And what I would say is none of us are part of the great religion of Islam. I think Islam needs to quieten down for a little bit, look internally, and debate with itself, because they can't even agree whether you have to be directly related to the Prophet Muhammad to be an imam, or whether anyone can be an imam. I think Islam has got so many problems that it needs to start looking internally, fix its own house, and then once it's done that, come back and address the rest of us, because Islam's not united even, so why should we unite with it? That's all I had to say.
Thank you very much. I was typing a note to Wesley, but since he's still in the backstage and he could hear me, I'll just say it like it is. Wesley, I'm shutting down the show, so I'm not going to bring you up on stage. Maybe you could join us another
Wesley's
time.
a troll, by the way.
Yeah, I'm familiar. I know who Wesley is. And Wesley, I just want to make sure you understand that if I do ever allow you up on the stage, I only have one rule for this channel, and I'm very serious about it, is it's about respect. So if you want to come up here and talk about your beliefs, everybody's welcome to do that. However, if you're going to tell people that they're going to go to hell or whatever because they don't believe what you believe, I consider that to be disrespectful, and I don't want to tolerate that kind of behavior, because we do need to be, respect is the what would I call the pillar of what this channel is trying to build, right? Everything is built up from that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and thank everyone for your participation today. I'm going to give some closing thoughts and then shut down the show. I saw somebody had left a very nice, oh, that's not the right thing. I don't know what I'm doing. Skyworks, thank you so much for the kind words. I appreciate that. I'm glad you enjoyed the show. I do apologize to everybody for not being as well prepared. I didn't know we were going to be talking about evolution, so I should have been a little bit better prepared for that. Although I do know a lot about the law of large numbers and mathematics, and so I feel like I did a pretty functional explanation of that. One thing I have noticed is I've actually mentioned that to a couple of creationists now, and they basically do the same thing my guest did today, which is to hand wave it away. It did double down. Oh, no, it's a mathematical impossibility. The law of large numbers literally refutes that claim. Like it's literal mathematical refutation of the claim that it's mathematically impossible for all these random mutations to happen. No, it's absolutely possible. In fact, we have a probability that we can ascribe to it if we actually could calculate the number of mutations that are happening all over the planet. And that doesn't even account for all the mutations that are happening, these collisions that are happening on a molecular level in the entire universe. I mean, we don't have a word that describes that number. It's near infinite. And if the universe is infinite, then that number would become infinite as well. So the law of large numbers is absolute refutation for anybody who says it's mathematic, that evolution is mathematically impossible. It absolutely is not mathematically impossible. And that I know for a fact. And I gave the explanation, I read it out as well. And everything I said matches what experts are saying about the law of large numbers and how that applies to both abiogenesis and evolution. The other thing that gets hand waved away is the effect of environmental pressure, right? The example that my guest was talking about today was, well, if you take a microchip and you put it out in the rain, it's eventually going to get destroyed. That somehow is supposed to disprove evolution. And that literally makes no sense. It's a false equivocation, right? And I tried to explain that to the guest, and he hand waved that away. So part of that is probably due to my own lack of ability to effectively communicate, which is on me, and I need to improve that. And the other thing, it may be on my guest or my interlocutors when they hand wave this away. They're not really taking the argument as seriously as it deserves to be taken, and that's just a fair criticism. So it could go both ways. I really enjoyed Khalid coming today. I'm very grateful for him coming and making his presentation. I feel like we have actually really good answers for all of his objections. I feel like I laid out the case. Although I didn't do the best job, I gave access to the information where all this can be addressed, right? Evolution, abiogenesis, law of large numbers, that deals with his creation problem. When the first surah we talked about was we can't even create a fly. Evolution answers all of that. We know where flies come from. The other was trying to think back now. What was the other one? I can't remember if there was something before the Big Bang, because we spent a lot of time on evolution, but the Big Bang itself, I did not see any of the vernacular in the Big Bang description in the surah he read. The concept of the earth and the heavens splitting apart goes back way beyond the Quran or the Hebrew Bible. We can trace this all the way back to the earliest written record in Sumer. I would recommend people look into what's called the Enuma Elish. You could see how this in the Middle East, how this story starts, and how the Abrahamic religions have all just basically copied off of that first story. You'll see a lot of things in Enuma Elish that the Abrahamic religions are copying off of, including the global flood narrative, so on and so forth. But you also see what's interesting is that even over in the Asian continent, like as I mentioned, in Taoism, you can look in I'm drawing a blank right now. Just forget it. You could look at almost all creation myths have a very similar concept, right? That the earth, the sky, the waters, these things all get separated at the beginning. Well, this is kind of a natural, what you would expect to see if human beings were inventing this before the scientific method was invented. We look at the sky above the earth. It looks to be separated. We see the rains dropping on our crops, right? So of course, these are just going to be natural progressions through observation. Once we apply the scientific method, then we understand where atmospheric pressure comes from, where rain, comes from, so on and so forth. Then we understand there's a big universe out there, and then we understand, the Earth is not at the center of it, nor is it flat. And so our ideas improve significantly thanks to advancements in science and technology. One of the issues that I have with postulating that religion has solved all these problems for us, or solved any problems for us, is that what we find is, as we continue to develop the scientific method and our understanding of empirical sciences, we solve problems in physics. We solve problems using biology, right? With our medical advancements. Science solves problems and gives us greater understanding and greater ability in every way. What we don't see, what we have never ever seen, is we don't ever see religion replacing a scientific theory. It's never happened. It's never going to happen. The reason is because these religions were developed by people who actually thought the earth was flat, so on and so forth, right? They didn't understand so much of what reality actually is, objective reality. They just understood what was in front of their faces. They didn't even understand there were continents on the other side of the ocean. I mean, they had no understanding of anything that really was substantial to them. They were all these medical practices and so on and so forth that were so ancient. They just had no understanding. You know, talk about in the Quran, I mentioned the sperm, right? My understanding is there's a surah that mentions that the sperm is generated between the back and the ribs, the spine and the ribs. Well, we know this is just biologically not true. We know this because of science. What we never see is we never see religion replacing a scientific theory. And there's a reason for that, which is why religion can be very dangerous, because it holds people in a state of ignorance and it compels them to remain there. And that's actually dangerous. It not only inhibits progression just in general, which I don't think is a good thing, but it can lead to a lot of us versus them, right? You're now forced to defend something you believe in as opposed to something that you can actually prove. I don't think, I've had some allergies or something. I don't know what the hell is going on this summer. I've never had allergies before, and so this is really frustrating to me. But there's been something I've been struggling with. At any rate, I digress. Forgive me. So what we do need to do is we need to continue to focus on learning to come together, learning to communicate it more effectively, learning to be respectful and gracious to our interlocutors so that we can have productive relationships. Productive relationships are actually more important than winning an argument, right? It's the most important thing. So if we get to a point where we're having an argument or a disagreement with somebody, maybe the best thing to do is to be the bigger person and to say, hey, you know what, family, we're going to have to agree to disagree, or I really appreciate that you're passionate about this, or whatever it might be. Find some positive way to separate yourself from the engagement and then re-engage in a more at some common ground, right? Like if it's your neighbor, hey, we're not having common ground on this conversation about religion, but I really like the way your flower bed looks today. Or do you want to borrow my lawnmower? Or, hey, how about I come over and mow your lawn for you? Would be even better, right? There's ways that we can reach out to other people by setting the better example, by being the better human being, because that's ultimately what's going to compel people to come to our side, right? Is to be the better person and to show that your life is better, that you're a happier person, that you're a more successful person, that you're more a well-adjusted person, that you have mental health, physical health. All this can come without religion. And if you can establish this without religion, then it gives people the evidence they need, because so many people will look at my life and say, wow, I want what that person has. Well, how did I get it? I didn't get it by praying for it. I went out and busted my ass, right? And that's how do I have these diverse relationships with so many different people? I didn't do it by coercing people. I did it by respecting people. And if that's the example we can set for each other, then we will draw more people to us, right? So that's, I guess I've got to get off my soapbox now. I'm going to thank everybody so much for being a part of the show. I really appreciated having everybody in the comments, and I do apologize if I missed people, because it's difficult for me to focus on the conversation and on the people and the chat and whatever the heck else is going on. So I appreciate you guys being understanding. If you feel like you got overlooked today, my apologies. Thank you so much for coming by.
channel. 3.30 for repeating, of course. that's better than I've done before. And Deacon Brennan, Will, what do you do? Wait, objective ethics will be on your plate.